The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by the Aiden Forecast, an investment newsletter with weekly updates of leading market indicators and a monthly deep dive into what the details of the economy and the markets mean for investors and retirees. On the web at aidenmarkets.com.
Wines have some of the highest pesticide levels in our food chain. This hour brought to you by ecowine.com. Pesticide-free wines, organic wines, imported from France by the Organic Wine Company, ecowine.com.
Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by Super Beets. Super Beets are sourced from non-GMO beets, and they're packed with dietary nitrates, helping to produce nitric oxide for more energy, stamina, and support for healthy blood pressure levels naturally. For more information, call 800-223-8242
or visit tomsbeets.com.
And it's the Thom Hartmann University Book Club. Today I'm reading from The Prophet's Way, A Guide to Living in the Now. It's actually a compilation of mostly, there's some commentary in there, but mostly it's diaries and letters that I sent to friends on travels around the world, and it's kind of a autobiography, I suppose, of sorts. This is from chapter, I don't know what the chapter number is. It's titled Life in a Teepee. It's on page 25. And it starts with a quote from Lenny Bruce. Every day, people are straying away from the church and going back to God. My best friend through school was Clark Stinson. We met when we were 13, and instead of pursuing the normal pastimes of teenagers, we spent our time studying Sanskrit. We had an old study guide book I found in my father's library, reading the Tibetan Book of the Dead and arguing minutiae from the Bible. Clark's mother was interested in metaphysics and shared a book called Autobiography of a Yogi with us. Years later, when I went to Detroit with her and Clark to attend an initiation in Kriya Yoga by Yogacharya Oliver Black, the oldest living disciple of Yogananda, I recognized Yogananda's Kriya technique as identical to an ancient Coptic exercise Master Stanley had taught us years earlier called the Cobra Breath. I introduced Clark to Master Stanley and Lee, and Clark and I began a serious study of spirituality. We were both in our late teens by then, and Clark had recently married. I was recovering from a painful breakup with a girlfriend, and we agreed that to do our spiritual work best, we should seek isolation. So Clark and his wife bought a teepee, and I bought one, and we three gave away everything else we owned in the world except some clothes and our spiritual books. We bought 100 pounds of wheat, 100 pounds of dried fruits, some basic camping equipment, and got a ride up into Michigan's Upper Peninsula, where an old trapper led us on a 3-day trek back into the Chippewa National Forest to a small lake that isn't on most maps. We spent the summer there, Clark and his wife on one side of the lake, me on the other. 3 days a week, we practiced silence and did meditation and prayer every day for hours. I had a pet tachnid fly, a small insect that looks like a honeybee but is actually a fly. When I'd meditate in the morning on my blanket outside my teepee, he'd come and hover just over my right hand as if he were drawing nourishment from me. Sometimes he'd hover there for as much as 20 minutes. Occasionally, he'd land and walk around with careful steps like an astronaut exploring a distant but friendly planet. I also shared my teepee with a large and furry brown and black wolf spider who came out at night as the sun set and picked the sleeping mosquitoes off the canvas on the west side of my teepee. I watched the play of life and death, predator and prey. Here's an odd synchronicity that Carl Jung would have appreciated. I haven't seen a tachnid fly for years, but as I'm typing these words into a laptop computer on my back porch in Atlanta, one just hovered over my left hand for a few moments and then landed. He's here with me as I'm typing, sitting on my hand. One cold and rainy afternoon, Clark and I were walking through the woods looking for berries and edible plants. We'd gotten pretty skilled at identifying what was safe and what wasn't, and we're filling a bag with leaves and fruits. This must be what our ancestors lived like, Clark observed, hunting and gathering. Except we're vegetarians, so we're just gathering, I said, joking. But to Clark, it wasn't a joke. Seriously, what we call civilization started when humans started farming. But humans like us were around for tens, maybe hundreds of thousands of years before that, fully conscious, awake, aware, thinking and feeling just like us. But they were hunters and gatherers instead of farmers. I said, without agriculture, there'd be no civilization. It was an interesting thought. Remember Miss Hemmer? Clark said. Miss Hemmer had been our 8th grade biology teacher and one of the best teachers I'd ever known in my life. Clark and I had conspired to make her life difficult, but we also loved her and learned more from her each month than from any of our other teachers in a year. And she was a huge fan of Margaret Mead. Clark said, she said that in primitive societies, there isn't suicide, depression, drug addiction, all that stuff. The noble savage, I said, shivering. I'm skeptical and cold. And the Indians who lived here once were probably cold, too. He shrugged and said, this life seems much more natural to me. At least I had to agree with that. A few days later, Clark came running over to my TV with his Bible, all excited. Look at this, he said, pointing to Genesis 4:2. It says, Cain was a tiller of the ground. The Bible is talking about how the first murderer was also the first farmer. And in the 25th verse, it makes it clear that Abel, the brother who was not the farmer, was the one who loved God the most. So what, I said. It's a classic archetype of the oldest child being the most beloved, but also the one who screws up. It's all over, from Greek mythology to Shakespeare. Don't you see, Clark said? Adam and Eve were gatherers like we are now. They walked around the Garden of Eden and picked up food. But then they tasted of the knowledge of good and evil, of life and death. That's your food supply. You live or die by it. When you live as a gatherer, you live by a whim of nature. If there's no food, you die. When you begin to store up food, you can defy nature and survive a drought. You then have the power to control life, the knowledge of life or death, or good and evil. So the tasting of the apple must have meant that Adam and Eve experimented with agriculture, and in doing so, they defied the God of nature. It's a warning. It's saying that the primitive life of hunting, gathering, and herding was more in accord with nature's way than is agriculture. Clark dove deep into the issue, but I didn't consider it all that important at the time. I couldn't see how when people started farming after the end of the Ice Age, it had been such a bad thing. After all, it brought us modern society and science. Clark, however, was totally certain that agriculture and what he called the organized ones were responsible for the coming death of the earth. The book, The Prophet's Way.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Friends, patriots, lovers of democracy, truth, and justice, believers in peace, freedom, and the American way. Thom Hartmann here with you. Well, Donald Trump is changing things, it seems. It's very interesting. Twice today. Now he's having dinner tonight with Paul Ryan at the White House. And that's going to be interesting. I think that the Republicans have figured out that all this language about Donald Trump basically going with whatever the last person he talked to said is probably true. That the guy's got an attention span that doesn't last more than 24 hours. And therefore, it's really important to get in his face a couple times a week if you want to have any control over the kinds of stuff he's going to do and say. But apparently, Paul Ryan was late coming to that party, late coming to that realization, late in figuring that out, because Nancy and Chuck got there first yesterday. It's fascinating. I got a note from old friend Jim Turr. He Blue Canyon Productions in New Mexico. His website is jimturr.com. And Jim does some just amazing music, in fact, actually, he sent us a little song, a 1-minute long song about time to replace George Washington on the dollar bill with Donald Trump. It's a satire. In fact, here it is. Here, this is Jim Turr.
Let's put Donald on the one instead of Washington. It's likely to annoy him, but we can all enjoy him when purchasing some gum or a miniature of rum. It'll be a lot of fun to have Donald on the one.
Yeah,
I'd love to see that smile every once in a while, even when he's gone back to wherever he came from. When purchasing some cheese in minute quantities, a reminder of when he made America great again. Yes, Washington had his day. Let's put someone new on display. Let's put Donald on the one. It'll be a lot of fun. That handsome face of his.
Okay, so anyway, that's Jim Turr stuff. So Jim sends me a note. He says, I keep thinking that if Trump ever talks to a couple of really smart folks like Schumer about anything after what he's been through, It might start to affect his perverted thinking in a positive direction. You know what I mean? I mean, wouldn't it just be peachy if essentially he turned into a Democrat again? We know he loves to shock and surprise more than anything. And then Jim includes this clip from Air Force One yesterday when Trump flew up to South Dakota, or North Dakota, excuse me. We had a very good meeting with Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer. We agreed to a 3-month extension on the debt ceiling, which they consider to be sacred, very important. Always will agree on debt ceiling automatically because of the importance of it, says Trump. So apparently, here's what happened. And, you know, we get this from multiple reports, and nobody's coming right out and saying it bluntly. And I'm going to do that. Now, there's a small chance that I'm wrong, but I don't think so. I mean, from everything I've read, everything I've seen, the photos I've seen, everything, you know, I wasn't in the room. I wasn't sitting there in the Oval Office with these guys. But basically, Trump calls together Pelosi and Schumer and Reid and Ryan, right? The two Democratic leaders of the House and Senate, and the two Republican leaders of the Senate and the House, and says, "Okay, you know, let's get something done here. What are we going to do? We've got to pay for the hurricane damage in Texas. We got to get this done right away. People are hurting. You know, we're all good socialists today." So we got to pay for that. We've got this debt ceiling stupidity coming, a law that Republicans passed back in the 1950s that was completely ignored until the Nixon administration. But it was back at the height of this. I mean, this was when the national debt was less than $500 billion, less than $500 billion, and still there were Republicans hysterical about it. Because, of course, even back in the 1950s, there were bankers who wanted all that money that is being saved by buying treasury bills, by being loaned to the U.S. government, except it's not even really a loan, by being put on deposit with the U.S. government, just like you can put money on deposit with a bank and you can get a reliable return on your investment in the form of interest. Now, right now, if you put your money with a bank, it's only guaranteed up to $250,000. You put your money with treasuries, and it's guaranteed to anything. It's backed by the full faith and confidence of the United States, something that, according to the 14th Amendment, shall not be questioned. All the Republicans are certainly doing a good job of it. But in any case, I digress. The Republicans, you know, Trump gets them together in the Oval Office and says, "Okay, what are we going to do about this?" Now, Ryan had a press conference that morning in which he said, "No way, we're going to go with a short-term raising of the debt ceiling. We're going to do it for at least a year and a half." Now, why would he say that? Because he wants to get it past the next election. He does not want the Republicans. See, the Republicans use this debt ceiling thing exactly for the purpose that, you know, craven Republicans put it into place in the first place back in the 1950s. They use this thing. It's not even, you know, can the government borrow more money? It's, will the government pay the bills it's already committed to, which is stupid. It's like you and your family having a debate about whether to pay the credit card when you have the means to pay it. So, you know, but this is our stupid national debate every year, thanks to the Republicans. So Paul Ryan was saying, no, it's got to go past the next election, because this is not only the weapon that we use against Democrats, but it's also a weapon Democrats can use against us when we're in the majority. We can use it against the Democrats when we're in the minority. And so Ryan and McConnell were absolutely no way, no 3-month extension of the debt ceiling, because that means that 3 months from now, and this is October, November, December, you know, January, well, October, November, December, anyway, sometime in December, we're going to have another debate about this. And Christmas is coming, and it's going to be hard to get people really cranked up unless the economy's in the tank or we're at war or something like that. And even then, this is going to... So, you know, basically, if the president went along with a 3-month extension of keeping the government open, then it has to be revisited in 3 months again, and that hurts the Republicans. So Trump says, okay, we need an extension. And Ryan says, how about 18 months? And Chuck Schumer or Nancy Pelosi, one of them say, no, we'll go with 3 months. So McConnell says, well, how about 6 months? Let's get it passed. I mean, there's a couple of elections at the end of this year, November of this year. Let's just get it past all of that stuff and put it next spring. And Schumer and Pelosi say, no, 3 months. And Trump is in just total deal-making mode. He doesn't really, frankly, care about the Republicans' little squabbles and who's got the power and who doesn't and all this kind of thing. In fact, I think he's getting sick and tired of the Republicans, which is a good thing for our country, arguably. So Trump says, okay, I like what Nancy and Chuck said. We're going to go with that. At which point, Ryan and McConnell are like, what? What did he just do? Really? So real quickly, Paul Ryan organized dinner tonight at the White House, I would submit to you. So is this the beginning of something really new? Now, who knows? And Paul Ryan tonight at dinner is going to do everything he can to put the absolute kibosh on this. But consider who Donald Trump is. Donald Trump is a sociopathic narcissist whose bucket is not only empty, but it has a hole in the bottom of it, his emotional bucket. Everybody he encounters, he asks, please put some love in this bucket. Please tell me I'm okay. Please, give me some attention and affection. Give me some recognition. Literally every circumstance, every situation, every person, that's Donald Trump. He doesn't care about what's best for the country. He doesn't care about world peace unless it gets him kudos. He doesn't care about, the national debt or no national debt. He doesn't care about any particular legislation. He does care about his taxes. He would like to no longer pay the alternative minimum tax. It's cost him $25 million a year, even when he pays no other taxes whatsoever, federal income taxes. He wants to get rid of that alternative minimum tax. The Republicans are down with that, so he's going along with them. But basically, this is a guy who has no philosophical core, and for years and years, he was a Democrat. And he knows Chuck Schumer quite well. Chuck Schumer represents New York, where Donald Trump is from. So is it possible? Now here you've got a guy who's president of the United States who campaigned on, I'm not going to touch, he said, every Republican up here on this stage during the primaries, he said, every Republican up here on this stage wants to cut your Social Security, your Medicare, and your Medicaid. I am not going to cut any of them. And then Mick Mulvaney, former Tea Party, Coke toady, now, the head of the Office of Management and Budget, Mick says, oh, but Social Security disability insurance, Mr. President, that's not actually Social Security. That's actually welfare. And Trump says, OK, go ahead and cut it. So they cut Social Security in his budget. And then somebody else says to him, oh, Medicaid, that's welfare. Those states can choose to do that or not. The Supreme Court said, Alito said so. And Trump's like, oh, OK, well, you can cut that, too. That's welfare. They're not welfare. So you've got Trump being made a fool of by Mick Mulvaney and by the Republicans around him. And I think, frankly, he's probably reaching the point where he's sick and tired of it. So he campaigned on, I'm not going to touch your entitlements. Maybe he will join with the Democrats and not touch the entitlements. He campaigned on, I'm going to stop the banksters on Wall Street. The Republicans want to empower the banksters. They want to do it with Dodd-Frank. Is he going to fight his own party and keep his campaign promises now? See, the only way, so many of these things that Trump campaigned on, he was going to blow up the free trade deals. The Republicans love the free trade deals. They're great for big corporations, lousy for workers. Democrats hate the free trade deals. Every single free trade deal, all the way back to the 1970s, has been fought by Democrats in Congress. Every single one. Yes, I know 2 Democratic presidents, Obama and Clinton, were in favor of free trade deals. They were fighting their own party. So is Trump going to turn into a Democrat? Just in order to get something done, because all he cares about is getting credit? Now he's getting credit. Hey, we moved things forward. This could get real weird, but real interesting.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
It's a very strange time in America. And of course, there's this giant hurricane coming for Florida. If you're in Florida, get the hell out of the state. And welcome back. Well, that's interesting. We have no free speech TV callers, so I can just go off on a rant, which is always fun. See, if you call during that first segment, you generally get on during this break. Anyhow, the Washington Post, this is Dana Milbank. And Desiree Feruz has been on this program. She was on our show, about 2 months ago, I think. She was the woman who was, during Jeff Sessions' confirmation hearings before the United States Senate, Jeff Sessions lied at least once, and many are asserting 2 or 3 times, to Congress during those confirmation hearings. The last time Sessions had confirmation hearings, to the best of my knowledge, was back in the late 70s, early 80s, when he was proposed to be a federal judge. And his own Republican colleagues would not confirm him because of his racist past. Jefferson Beauregard Sessions III. Yes. So at his confirmation hearings, Jeff Sessions is testifying, and somebody asks him the question. Let's see here. I've got the actual question. He said, where'd it go? Oh, maybe I don't have the question. Anyhow, he was asked the question about, oh yeah, here it is. Mr. Sessions, would you treat all Americans equally under the law? And when that question was asked of Sessions, Desiree Feruz, who was standing at the back of the room, started laughing. Not, disruptively, just laughing. I would have laughed too. I mean, are you kidding? Jeff Sessions treating all persons equal under the law? Are you kidding? So what did they do? They arrested her and hauled her out. And Jeff Sessions has apparently directed his Justice Department to prosecute Desiree Feruz for laughing at him. And she was prosecuted, and she was convicted of laughing at him. But actually, it turns out when she was convicted of trying to resist the police officer who was dragging her out of the room. So that's what she was convicted of, but she had only been charged with laughing at Jeff Sessions, with disruption. So an appeals court judge threw out the conviction, said this is nonsense. So Sessions' Department of Justice comes back and says, this woman's just a local activist, right? I mean, she's not like, the scion of some multi-billion-dollar family or something. It's not like she's got lawyers on retainer. This is really tough stuff to go up against the U.S. Justice Department. You got to have lawyers. You got to have money. And they're going after her again, and they're going to put her on trial a second time. Dana Milbank editorializing about this in yesterday's Washington Post. The headline, apparently it's illegal to laugh at Jeff Sessions. Yeah, apparently it is. This is what happens in fascistic countries. This is, if you're in Saudi Arabia and you say, the king is not a good guy, they cut your head off. Well, Saudi Arabia is the country that Trump loves. Coming here now. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. So Trump, we had a very good meeting with Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer. We agreed to a 3-month extension on the debt ceiling, which they consider to be sacred. Very important. Always will agree on debt ceiling automatically because of the importance of it. And in the midst of this, Steve Mnuchin, who was in the room, had been in the middle of this whole long explanation about we need a longer extension of the debt ceiling because that will provide safety and security to financial markets, which is the BS excuse that these guys trot out all the time. It's just a total, it's like, okay, if you want to give the financial markets safety and security, raise the debt ceiling for a year. Raise the debt ceiling for 5 years. end the debt ceiling. There's no reason for it. There is literally no reason for Congress every year to have to pass legislation saying, yeah, we can spend more money, because Congress already has the authority to spend the money. It's like writing a law that says for yourself, that says that you may only pay your bills when you and your spouse sit down and have a meeting and decide that we're going to pay our bills. And if either one of you says, no, I don't want to pay the bills today, then the bills don't get paid. Completely ignoring the fact that, there's a bill for those bills. So some of the things that Trump ran on a policy, again, largely a Democratic Party policy, of no more stupid wars. It was Democrats who opposed George W. Bush's stupid wars in Afghanistan and Iraq. Now, I get it that, particularly with Afghanistan, most Democrats voted for it. Barbara Lee, God bless her, and, stood up. And history has recorded that well. But Trump, ran on this platform. He basically, and I kept saying this during the Republican primary, when I was predicting that Trump was going to win the Republican primary, I was saying the reason why is because the vast majority of Americans are actually Democrats, or they're actually progressive or weakly progressive. Moderate progressives are actual progressives, the vast majority of Americans. I mean, any survey, look at any survey. The majority of Americans think that Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid should be solid and strong. The majority of Americans think everybody should be covered with health insurance. The majority of Americans want everyone to have a free college education. The majority of Americans think nobody should have student debt. The majority of Americans believe nobody should be wiped out by getting sick. The majority of Americans think that the government should be the employer of last resort. The majority of Americans support the extension of long-term uninsurance or unemployment benefits. I mean, it just goes on and on. The list of things. The majority of Americans support the rights of gay people. The majority of Americans support the right of women to do what they choose with their own bodies. The majority of Americans support the separation of church and state. The majority of Americans think taxes should be raised on billionaires and lowered on working people. The majority of Americans think our war on drugs is stupid. The majority of Americans think the Citizens United is wrong, and the billionaires and big corporations should not be able to own politicians. The majority of Americans think that we should have massive spending for infrastructure, even if it means borrowing the money, because we'll make it back, in the added economic activities. The majority of Americans think public schools should be strengthened. The majority of Americans think that privatized prisons are a bad idea. The majority of Americans think that, that voting integrity should be at the top of the list, and that voting machines that are privately owned by Republican-leaning corporations should be thrown out.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
The majority of Americans don't want stupid trade deals. The majority of Americans don't want the government spying on us. The majority of Americans think that climate change is real.
Welcome back to Thom Hartmann University Book Club. We're reading today from Screwed, The Undeclared War Against the Middle Class and What We Can Do About It. This is from Chapter 3, The Rise of the Corporatocracy, and it's in the middle of the chapter. It's the subchapter or subhead is Feudalist Takeover. America was not conceived of as a feudal state, F-E-U-D-A-L, feudalism being broadly defined as rule by the super rich. Our nation was created in large part in reaction against centuries of European feudalism. As Ralph Waldo Emerson said in his lecture titled The Fortune of the Republic, delivered on December 1st, 1863, quote, "We began with freedom. America was opened after the feudal mischief was spent. No inquisitions here, no kings, no nobles, no dominant church," end quote. The founding idea of America was that our country would not be ruled by a handful of very powerful rich men. America was founded as a country ruled by we the people, And for democracy to work, there had to be a strong and broad middle class. Even at our country's founding, there were some who who couldn't quite shake the idea that aristocracy was the way to go. As Jefferson warned in a letter in 1826 to William B. Giles, there are even those who, quote, look to a single and splendid government of an aristocracy founded on banking institutions and moneyed corporations under the guise and cloak of their favorite branches of manufactures, commerce and navigation, riding and ruling over the plundered plowmen and beggared yeomanry, farmers and factory workers. This will be to them the next blessing of the monarchy, of their first aim and perhaps the surest stepping stone to it. The aristocracy that Jefferson feared rose first during the Gilded Age in the 1880s, when just a few companies seized control of much of America, including many of our elected officials. The major form of transportation and communication in those days was the railroads, and the railroads were owned by the Vanderbilts. The major form of energy then, as today, was oil, monopolized by John D. Rockefeller's Standard Oil Trust. And the major form of trade was in manufactured goods, which required factories, which in turn required steel, monopolized by Andrew Carnegie and his Carnegie Steel Company. These monopolists required ways to retain their hold on the money, so they turned to financiers like Jay Gould and John Pierpont Morgan, who set up large trusts for them. The Progressive Movement and then FDR beat back these monopolists with the Sherman Antitrust Act, the National Labor Relations Act, the Wagner Act, and other laws that regulated the game of business. Then Ronald Reagan, George Bush Sr., Bill Clinton, and George Bush Jr. came along and turned back the clock. Reagan fought the labor laws. Bush Sr. pushed for fast-track trade authority for the president. Clinton finally took down trade protections with NAFTA. And Bush Jr. put corporate executives into the driver's seat on government legislation. We've entered a new robber baron era. Today, the major form of communication is by phone and the internet in an area increasingly monopolized by the new AT&T, formerly SBC Singular AT&T. The major form of energy, oil, is controlled by just a handful of companies. Today's economic driver is the computer. Its software is monopolized by Microsoft, and its hardware is manufactured by a handful of oligarchs. Today, as in the Gilded Age, the rich are richer than ever. Forbes crows that in 2005, the rich got richer as the collective net worth of the United States' wealthiest climbed $125 billion to $1.13 trillion. That's greater than the gross domestic product of Spain or Canada. Bill Gates alone is worth $51 billion. 5 Walton family members, the owners of Walmart, made it into the top 10. Meanwhile, median household income fell for the 5th year in a row. In 1972, the median income for a person with a high school diploma was the equivalent of $42,600 in today's dollars. In 2002, the last year for which the National Center for Education Statistics compiled such numbers, a person with a high school diploma has a median income of $29,600. As the rich got richer, the rest of us got poorer, particularly what used to be of our middle class. The hallmark of the corporatocracy is monopoly. Fewer people holding more of the wealth, fewer companies holding more of the commons. The very competition that the conservatives claim to embrace is destroyed by the unrestrained growth of corporate interests. Big fish eat little fish over and over until there are no little fish left. And they eat the middle-sized fish until they're gone too. Look at the thoroughfares of any American city and ask yourself how many of the businesses here are locally owned. Instead of cash circulating within the local economy, at midnight, every night a button is pushed and the local money from all over America is vacuumed away to Little Rock or Chicago or New York. And the corporate lords want more. Not content with their hold over the private sector, they want to take over the public sector too. When Jeb Bush was governor of Florida and cut a deal with Enron to privatize the Everglades, it diminished the power of the Florida government to protect a natural resource and enhanced the power and profitability of Enron. Similarly, when politicians argue for harsher sentencing guidelines and also advocate more corporate-owned prisons, they're enhancing the power and profits of one of America's fastest-growing and most profitable remaining domestic industries, privately owned prisons. The cons look at the government's pollution controls and see regulations that get in the way of their profits. They look at single-payer health care and see a threat to the pharmaceuticals industry's practice of price gouging. They look at Social Security and see an opportunity for more bonuses for Wall Street fat cats. And on it goes. The book is Screwed.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. Wow, this the AAAS, the American Association, the American Academy for the Advancement of Science, has this article. Russian scientists deny climate model of IPCC. Basically, they're looking at the Arctic, the Russian Arctic, where there are trillions of tons of methane frozen in the permafrost. And they're saying that the IPCC estimates of how rapidly this stuff is going to melt and throw CH4, methane, into the atmosphere, which is a massively powerful greenhouse gas, that these estimates are way too conservative, way too cautious, and that things are melting much, much faster than we thought. That is not reassuring. Anyhow, I just the whole, for this hour, there's a whole bunch of other news that I want to get into in the next hour and the hour after that. But for this hour, I want to talk about this possibility that there might be an opening here for Democrats to basically split the Republican Party in half using Donald Trump. And that it would work to the benefit of Donald Trump. So, Donald, if you're listening, keep doing this. The Republicans are not your friend. You got Mick Mulvaney, who lied to you and told you that Social Security disability insurance was welfare. So you agreed to cut Social Security, thus hurting yourself with your base. You've got Paul Ryan, who lies to you about things like minimum wage, thus hurting your base. You got Mitch McConnell, who lies to you about, why they're doing many of the things they're doing. They're, reducing regulations. Why? So that we can increase pollution. Well, why would we want to increase pollution? It's going to cause people to die. Well, because it's more money for the Republican donor base. Well, Donald, you shouldn't have to worry about the Republican donor base. You got your own money, right? And you got a couple of rich friends. You got Robert Mercer and his daughter Rebecca, and Shelley Adelson and a few others. So, work with the Democrats and make some things happen for the best of the country rather than just the best of the oligarchs. Is it possible? It's exactly how he campaigned. And it's what the people that I know who voted for Trump are hoping and expecting. So let's see what happens. So far, the only part of his base that his advisors have let him stay in touch with has been the racist, foaming at the mouth white supremacists. But when Trump realizes that if he behaves like a Democratic president, if he out LBJ's LBJ, which he could do right now, he only needs, 2-3 Republicans in the Senate and 20 or so Republicans in the House of Representatives to basically run roughshod over the entire Republican Party and actually get a lot of things done with his presidency. Or am I just being insanely naive? See, I think the fact that Donald Trump only cares about Donald Trump works to the benefit of whoever figures that out first. Obviously, on the international scene, the people who figured that out first were China and Saudi Arabia. And Japan. Abe was just falling all over himself to suck up to Trump. And then Saudi Arabia put on a grand show for him. He'll never forget how much they love him over there. Wilbur Ross even came back and said, weren't even any protests. Well, of course not. If you protest in Saudi Arabia, they cut your head off. Wilbur Ross apparently didn't know that. He's only worth $5 billion, and he's only a member of the president's cabinet as a commerce secretary. He doesn't mean that he has to know how things work in the world, right? Anyway, Maria in Evanston, Illinois. Hey, Maria, what's on your mind today?
Hi, Tom.
Hi.
I was really inspired yesterday when the call came in to you and you found out about Trump working with Senator Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi. After that, I called all my representatives here in Illinois, which, thank God, are all Democratic, and I encouraged them to work with Trump whenever there's a window of opportunity, because we have to move the country forward.
Well, and not only that, it's not hurting the Democratic Party. It's hurting the Republican Party.
Yeah. And I commended what they did. I even called Nancy Pelosi's office and Chuck Schumer's office, too, to commend them on what they've done. And I want to say today I called the White House to commend President Trump for working across the aisle.
That's great. I mean, it's important to notice when people do good things as well as it is to hopefully positively criticize them when they do bad things.
Right.
Excellent.
And I also added more things to the list when I was talking to the White House. I said if he could sign the DACA legislation that hopefully is going to come forward, and also health care, to relook at health care. And I told the operator that I'd heard that President Trump thinks that it's health care is like life insurance, that it's only $12, $15 a month, and that he needs to know more about that to educate himself, that really it's very expensive for people and families of their income. And I also encouraged him to work on building roads and bridges, infrastructure, like Roosevelt did, the WPA program.
Yeah, except that they want to do it in a way that is billionaire friendly and America unfriendly. But I don't think the Democrats will let him do that. And if he just the cost of borrowing is so low right now, and we know that for every dollar you invest in infrastructure, you get between $10 and $100 back in tax revenues over the life of that infrastructure, depending on if it's got a 20-year lifespan or a 100-year lifespan. And this is common sense that could easily be sold, I would think, to Donald Trump. Maria, thank you for the call, and thanks for being so proactive out there. Great talking with you.
I called Bernie Sanders, and I asked him to educate President Trump about health care.
Yeah, he needs to. He really needs to have dinner with Trump. And I mean, there should be we've got this neophyte in the White House. There should be a full court press to make something happen. Maria, hopefully you and I aren't just being hopelessly optimistic, but we'll see where this goes. Maria, thank you for the call. Joe in Chicago Heights, Illinois. Hey, Joe, what's up?
Yes, hi, Tom. I just wanted to say something about not getting too far off track with Trump making a deal with Schumer and Pelosi, because one thing that psychologists seem to overlook in the spectrum of his personality disorders is the great need he has to constantly have people angry at him. And we learned this looking at all these lawsuits that he was involved in. Many of them were not to his benefit. He just simply broke contracts, which apparently were for just because he wanted to get people mad at him.
Yeah, well, I don't think that he wanted people to get mad at him. I think he's just a greedy little man. Louise and I had dinner a week or so ago with a fellow whose company had contracted. It was a law firm actually, and a PR firm had contracted with the Trump organization to do some work for them back 10, 15 years ago. And when the work was all done, the message they got from the Trump organization when they submitted their bill was, your payment is that you can now put on your resume that you've done work for the Trump organization. It's great bragging rights, and it's worth a lot more than the money that you say we owe you. We're not paying you. And so they hired a lawyer, or they were large enough that they had in-house counsel. And so they sued. It took a couple of years, but they eventually got their money out of Trump. I think that there's enough people who say, okay, sorry, I can't afford to sue you, and they just let Trump walk away with free work. I think this is just one of the ways that he does business. I think this is how I don't know if most developers in New York do this, or just the mobbed up ones, where people are afraid to go after him because they don't want Joe Bananas to have Vito stick a knife in their back. But this is apparently how he does business. So I don't think that he's so motivated by wanting people angry at him. I think he's motivated by wanting people to love him.
Well, except to see if his narcissistic issues is that he is dead inside. And in order for him to feel something, he has to get the experience from an external force.
Good.
So some kind of, showing of love or aggravation and conflict. That's how he gets feeling.
Yeah,
and
good
if you
point.
look at many of his decisions, you can see that many of his decisions are not based on logic, but are based on getting people angry.
So in this case, he gets to anger the Republicans.
That's correct. I think that he's happy to get Ryan and McConnell mad at him, and that's his primary driver in this. That's
interesting. Well, it's going to be real interesting to see if he changes his tune tomorrow after he has dinner with Ryan tonight. Following the theory that Trump says whatever the last person who talked to him says. We'll find out. Ryan's got his sales pitch. Ryan's a real slick guy. I mean, Ryan can lie with, what's the old joke? You can tell he's lying because his lips are moving. Ryan just, he's so smooth. He's such an effective liar about these issues. It'll be interesting to see. Joe, thanks a lot for the call. Richard in Chicago. Hey, Richard, what's up?
Hey, Tom. Thanks for all your great work. I almost jumped out of my seat when you started to explain your thought about the deal that Trump made with Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer. I fully agreed. I told two people this morning when I walked into my office that was the driving force. And I think that the opportunity right now for the Democrats is exactly what you said. And if I were the head of the DNC or head of Senate or the House, I would say, look, we have an opportunity now. We know what the president's, quote unquote, weakness is and strength. He likes to be loved, so I agree with you on that. And why don't we find the areas that we can show him the most love that are going to benefit the country and get those deals done that are a direct opposition to what Republicans want to get done?
Yep.
And that will then also translate into what the Democrats' message should be in the midterm elections, the next national election, and certainly some of the state elections that are going on throughout the country. Right here in Chicago, I mean, it's interesting that your three consecutive callers are all within a 50-mile radius of each other here in Chicago, and we all are seeing it the same way. This is what the Democrats need to do right now, is gather that momentum with the message from the head of the DNC, Chuck and Nancy.
Or, Chuck Schumer has a good relationship with Trump. He's the one who should be having dinner with him tonight. I'm not sure that, that anybody else is going to do it as well. Richard, thank you for the call. Well said.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
Back with more of your calls, my thoughts, and more of the news of the day. And boy, is there a bunch of it right after this. And welcome back. Bill in Sebastian, Florida, watching Free Speech TV on the Dish Network. Hey, Bill, what's up? Bill? Bill, you got to listen to your telephone, not your TV. Otherwise, there's a delay in there. And anyhow, Steve in Rochester, New York. Hey, Steve, what's on your mind today?
Tom, I was a little bit concerned about what you were saying about Jeff.
Jeff Sessions?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
First of all, the lady was... I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
If your TV is turned on, Steve, you need to turn it off right away or turn it down and just talk to me on the phone.
Okay, all right. I got the phone, my TV off.
Okay.
The big thing, Tom, is the lady was arrested for disturbing a session of Congress.
Right.
And that was why she was arrested. And then she resisted the policeman, who was only doing his job.
Right, but they didn't charge her with resisting the policeman.
Now, I don't like the way that you go about some of these things. It's a technique Dr. Goebbels used in Germany.
Right.
Now, you get a little bit of truth, and then you spin it. Now, she was arrested. She was arrested for disturbing.
She was arrested for laughing out loud. No, Steve. The technique that you're using, Steve, is a classic Nazi technique, and that is to take a non-crime and expand it into a horrible crime. You're saying that a woman laughing in the back of the Senate chambers is disturbing the peace. That's not disturbing the peace. That's laughing. That's free speech. The First Amendment of the Constitution guarantees that to us. You have the right to laugh at Jeff Sessions. So don't give me this authoritarian stuff, this Nazi stuff, Steve.
You're wrong, Tom. On the big point, it isn't free speech to disturb Congress. You disturb Congress, that is not free speech.
Steve, should the member of Congress who screamed "You lie" at President Obama have been arrested?
In the middle of what they're trying to do.
Steve?
If somebody broke into your studio and tried to interrupt you, then you're wrong.
Hello, Steve.
You see, they don't have the right to do that.
Steve's not listening to me. Apparently. Steve, should the guy who yelled "You lie" at President Obama and disturbed the State of the Union address, should he have been arrested?
Yes. Very definitely.
Even though he was a member of Congress?
I don't care about that. He disrupted a legitimate meeting.
Man, you are a lover of authoritarian systems, aren't you, Steve?
I'm a lover of free speech.
Well, how do you reconcile that?
And people like you are the enemy of free speech.
I'm the enemy of free speech.
You definitely are. You will only have free speech for your side. You want to interrupt people who are legitimately holding a meeting. Nobody has the right to interrupt you.
Well, I'm letting you interrupt me, Steve.
Yeah, and you're interrupting me.
Yeah,
so
that's true.
We can do that because we're individual, and we're not in a public meeting set up to explore things.
Yeah. Steve, respectfully, I disagree. Thank you for the call. We'll be back. Stick around. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you, and Arnold in Macon, Georgia. Hey, Arnold, what's up?
Hey, Steve. Tom, how you doing?
Good. What's on your mind?
I was just listening to you and Steve and some other comments going on around Donald Trump. I just want to throw one thing in. I'm pretty sure you're quite familiar with when you made this when you cleared up the fact that Judge Roy Moore was wrong about the United States being a Christian nation. Well, in that take, it's saying that the United States was not built on a religious foundation. And when you put it in the two text, that means the United States is not a sanctioned nation.
It's not a what?
A sanction.
Sanctioned?
Right.
Sanctioned by whom?
The divine spirit, divine truth. Meaning if it's not built on truth, then no judge in the United States is valid.
Right.
The president
Okay.
is not valid. Because if you look at the apotheosis of George Washington, that will explain the ascension of the man of sin to the throne of the creator of truth.
Right. So the divine truth, the Word of God, Arnold, says that it's appropriate and legal to own slaves as long as you don't treat them too badly.
Exactly.
Is that something that you think we should put back into law here in the United States since we're basing our country on the Bible?
Well, not just that see, it's too late to base on the Bible now because you have 400 years of history of neglecting the Bible.
So you're saying that American law supersedes the Bible?
Well, this is what the man of sin is representing. In other words, the laws in America are not based on religious laws. They're based on the Constitution. And the Constitution is a racist document. And you know how it was written when George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, and all them boys wrote it up. It only included rich white men. It didn't even include poor white people.
No, I got all that, Arnold. And they use the Bible to justify it. And that's why I'm very wary when anybody comes along and says, our country has to be sanctified by, the Bronze Age sky god from 3,000 years ago in the Old Testament, or the young Jewish guy who died when he was 30 years old, who 2,000 years ago, or what Muhammad said, 700 years ago, or however long it was, 1,400 years, whenever Islam started.
Well, let me ask you a question. Anytime the president takes his obligation to the oath of office, what do he take that obligation on?
Well, that's not in the Constitution. That's not a requirement of law. That's simply a custom. Keith Ellison swore himself in on the Quran.
But I'm asking, he takes this oath of office on supposedly the Bible. Right?
No, it's not. He's taking the oath of office on the Constitution. He puts his hand on the Bible. Arnold, we're running down a rabbit hole here, and it's an interesting and entertaining conversation, but there's some serious stuff on the table. So I'm going to move along. Arnold, thank you for the call. Randy in Ottawa, Iowa. Hey, Randy, what's up?
My friend Thom Hartmann and Company.
Hey, Randy, how you doing?
I had to call in because of your opening comment asking the question, is this a new day or a dawning of something? And I disagree. There's nothing new under the sun here. It is he's setting himself up, taking care of business that needs to be taken care of, using that as a stepping stone to get to his new pet project, and that is tax reform and tax cuts of that $2 trillion that's laying overseas that the American taxpayer paid corporations to leave, and now all that profit was made at 33 1/3%, and they're going to give them a tax holiday or a tax cut, and the American worker is not going to get.
Yeah, they want to drop it to 5%. When Bush did that same thing, dropped it to 5%, virtually all of the money that came back to this country was used for share buybacks, which jacked up the price of the stock, helped out investors and helped out the CEOs and screwed everybody else.
Yep. So that's what I think. I believe that it's
no, I agree with you, but he's going to have a hard time getting that past the Democrats. And if the Democrats could work with him and say, here's how to do this in a way that's not so toxic. But I don't know. One of the disease is probably too strong a word, but one of the conditions that I suffer from, Randy, is that I'm an optimist. I look at situations and I'll acknowledge the horror of situations. I've been in terrible situations. I've been in the middle of wars. I mean, I've been in just horrible places. But the question I'm always asking myself is, how can we make this better? What can we do with this? How can we turn this lemon into a lemonade? I get how toxic Trump is, and I absolutely get how the Republicans around him, how toxic they are. But yesterday something happened that McConnell and Ryan were absolutely not expecting, absolutely not prepared for. Donald Trump stepped over a line that I don't think any president has stepped over in my lifetime, and that is to directly contradict the leadership of his own party and basically, step on their whole legislative policy that was designed to trap the other party. He stepped on that. He crushed that and ruined their plans right in front of them, right in the presence of the Democratic leaders. And then on top of that, spoke well of Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi on Air Force One on the way to South Dakota yesterday. And then on top of that, this morning, Nancy Pelosi called up Donald Trump and said, you got 800,000 teenagers and people in their early 20s, young people in this country, who are scared to death. Some of them are thinking about suicide. They're calling doctors to get, prescriptions for anti-anxiety drugs. You need to help these kids stop freaking out. And so Trump this morning tweeted out, if you're a DACA person, relax. We're going to take care of it. We're going to take care of you. Everything's going to be fine. And yesterday he had said, if the Republicans in Congress can't get this together, then I'll basically do what President Obama did and do it by executive order, which blows up his whole argument that the executive order is unconstitutional and illegal, by the way. It just lays bare what his real agenda is, which is anything that had Obama's name attached to it, he's going to try and destroy. But if it's a good idea, he's going to try and replace it with something that's got his name attached to it. I'm waiting to see him do the same thing with health care. But we'll see, Randy, we'll see. Randy, thanks a lot for the call. We'll be right back.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by the Aiden Forecast, an investment newsletter with weekly updates of leading market indicators and a monthly deep dive into what the details of the economy and the markets mean for investors and retirees. on the web at aidenmarkets.com.
Wines have some of the highest pesticide levels in our food chain. This hour brought to you by ecowine.com. Pesticide-free wines, organic wines, imported from France by the Organic Wine Company, ecowine.com.
Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by Super Beets. Super Beets are sourced from non-GMO beets, and they're packed with dietary nitrates, helping to produce nitric oxide for more energy, stamina, and support for healthy blood pressure levels naturally. For more information, call 800-223-8242
or visit tomsbeets.com.
Today in the Thom Hartmann University Book Club, we're reading from the Thom Hartmann Reader. This is page 266, the chapter, The True Story of the Boston Tea Party, excerpted from Unequal Protection. On a cold November evening, activists gathered in a coastal town. The corporation had gone too far, and 2,000 people who jammed into the meeting hall were torn as to what to do about it. Unemployment was exploding. The economic crisis was deepening. Corporate crime, governmental corruption spawned by corporate cash, and an ethos of corporate greed were blamed. Why do we wait? Demanded one at the meeting, a fisherman named George Hughes. The more we delay, the more strength is acquired by the company and its puppets in government. Now is the time to prove our courage, he said. Soon the moment came when the crowd decided for direct action and rushed into the streets. This is how I tell the story of the Boston Tea Party now that I've read a first-person account of it. While trying to understand my nation's struggles against corporations, I came upon a first edition of a book titled A Retrospect of the Boston Tea Party with a memoir of George R.T. Hughes, a survivor of the little band of patriots who drowned the tea in Boston Harbor in 1773. And I jumped at a chance to buy it. Because the identities of the Boston Tea Party participants are hidden other than Sam Adams, and all were sworn to secrecy for the next 50 years, this volume, published 51 years after the Tea Party, is the only first-person account of the event by a participant that exists, as far as I can tell. As I read, I began to understand the true causes of the American Revolution. I learned that the Tea Party resembled in many ways the growing modern-day protests against transnational corporations and the small-town efforts to protect themselves against chain store retailers and factory farms. The Boston Tea Party's participants thought of themselves as protesters against the illegal actions of the multinational East India Company. Although school children are usually taught that the American Revolution was a rebellion against taxation without representation, akin to modern-day conservative taxpayer revolts, in fact, what led to the revolution was rage against a transnational corporation that, by the 1760s, dominated trade from China to India to the Caribbean and controlled nearly all commerce to and from North America, with subsidies and special dispensation from the British Crown. Hughes notes, the East India Company received permission to transport tea free of all duty from Great Britain to America, end of quote, enabling it to wipe out New England-based tea wholesalers and mom-and-pop stores and take over the tea business in all of America. Hence, Hughes told his biographer, it was no longer the small vessels of private merchants who went to vend tea for their own account in the ports of the colonies, but on the contrary, ships of an enormous burthen that transported immense quantities of this commodity. The colonies had now arrived at the decisive moment when they must cast the die and determine the course. A pamphlet called The Alarm was circulated through the colonies and signed by the enigmatic Rusticus. One issue made clear the feelings of colonial Americans about England's largest transnational corporation and its behavior around the world. Their conduct in Asia for some years past has given simple proof how little they regard the laws of nations, the rights, liberties, or lives of men. They have levied war, excited rebellions, dethroned lawful princes, and sacrificed millions for the sake of gain. The revenues of mighty kingdoms have entered their coffers. And these not being sufficient to glut their avarice, they have, by the most unparalleled barbarities, extortions, and monopolies, stripped the miserable inhabitants of their property and reduced whole provinces to indigence and ruin. 1,500,000, it is said, perished by famine in 1 year, not because the earth denied its fruits, but because this company and their servants engulfed all the necessities of life and set them at so high a price that the poor could not purchase them. After protesters had turned back the company's ships in Philadelphia and New York, Hughes writes, in Boston, the general voice declared
that the time has come to face the storm. The citizens of the colonies were preparing to throw off one of the corporations that for almost 200 years had determined nearly every aspect of their lives through its economic and political power. They were planning to destroy the goods of the world's largest multinational corporation, intimidate its employees, and face down the guns of the government that supported it. And so, as Hughes says, on that cold November evening in 1773, the first of the East India Company's ships of tax-free tea arrived in Boston Harbor. The next morning, a pamphlet was widely circulating, calling on patriots to meet at Faneuil Hall to discuss resistance to the East India Company and its tea. Things thus appeared to be hastening to a disastrous issue, wrote Hughes. The people of the country arrived in great numbers. The inhabitants of the town assembled. This assembly on the 16th of December, 1773, was the most numerous ever known, there being more than 2,000 from the country present. The group called for a vote on whether to oppose the landing of the tea. The vote was unanimously affirmative, and it is related by one historian of that scene, quote, that a person disguised after the manner of the Indians who was in the gallery shouted at this juncture the cry of war, and that the meeting dissolved in the twinkling of an eye, and the multitude rushed in a mass to Griffin's Wharf. That night, Hughes, blackening his face with coal dust, dressed as an Indian and joined crowds of other men in hacking apart the chests of tea and throwing them into the harbor. In all, the 342 chests of tea, more than 90,000 pounds thrown overboard that night, were worth, in today's currency, just over $1 million. Book, The Thom Hartmann Reader.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. The Hurricane Irma is on its way to Florida. It's already done considerable damage to people in a number of countries. The little island of Barbuda, I guess it is, or Barbuda, yeah, it's like Bermuda without the R or something. But anyway, 1,200 people on the island. They just 90% of their buildings destroyed. I mean, this is serious damage that has happened. Thank you. And we're looking at dead, people who are dead. I mean, over 50 people now in Texas, and there's more to come. And the question, I think, really needs to be asked: who's going to pay for this? Who's responsible for this? There's not yet a consensus in the scientific community, but there are a number of scientists who are coming out and saying that probably, we've had hurricanes in this part of the world forever, at least as long as humans have been around. But they haven't been this strong. We haven't had mile-wide tornadoes in Oklahoma until the last decade or two. We haven't had these insanely strong storms. They are the clear consequence of the oceans being warmer and of the atmosphere being warmer and having more water vapor in it. This is the clear consequence of that. As air warms up, it holds more water. As water warms up, it evaporates more water. So you've got the oceans, which are warm, fueling the convection, the motion, the physical motion of air above them, which turns into hurricanes. And you've got warm water evaporating water moisture into the air more rapidly, which adds to the volume of water which falls when these hurricanes hit land, which was vividly on display with Hurricane Harvey in Houston. We see these things, right? This is not some mysterious process or something like that. It's right there in front of us, right there for us to look at. And if we don't start asking the question, where did this come from? How did this happen? What's going on? Why is it that so many people are dying? Why is it that these storms are so severe? And the answer comes right down to a very, very simple thing. And that is that the fossil fuel industry, which is known for years that their products do this to us. ExxonMobil learned this back in the 70s. The first scientist, the first credible scientist to talk about carbon dioxide as a greenhouse gas that could warm the planet was in 1880. This is not, something that we just woke up to last week. And yet the fossil fuel industry has been actively sending money from their profits, from the poisons that they sell us and that they put into our atmosphere. They have been taking the profits from those poisons and they have been using them to buy media, to buy public relations, to buy politicians, to send deceptive textbooks into schools, to hire climate deniers in colleges. They have used this to essentially create a situation that is killing us. 50 people are dead in Houston, and I'm guessing that there will probably be more as they start tearing apart some of these houses that have been literally underwater, where people who might have been trying to get to their roof and got as far as their attic got trapped and swamped, or people who were on dialysis machines or iron lungs or whatever in their homes, people who couldn't move, or people who simply didn't have the means. They were not wealthy enough to own a car. Public transportation had shut down. The buses weren't running. What are they going to do? There's going to be more and more of this. Mark Hurtisgaard has a piece over at The Nation titled "Climate Denialism is Literally Killing Us." And he starts with the story of Jordan Grace. Jordan Grace is this 3-year-old child who survived the flood in Houston by clinging to the body of her dead mother. As her mother was dying, she was praying, save me, save my baby. She died. Her baby survived. At least 60 people in Texas have died because of the storm. Over 1 million are displaced. And who knows, Mark writes, how many survived but lost everything. Keep in mind, by the way, flood insurance, most flood insurance only pays around $30,000 in a full claim. A full payout. Even those people with flood insurance are going to be wiped out. And this has happened to Texas. It's now about to happen to Florida. Yes, we routinely have these kind of things happen in the United States, but not like this, not at this level, not with this level of severity. 16 million children in Nepal and India and Bangladesh right now are homeless, and many of them without food or water. Pretty soon the cholera epidemics begin, the famine begins, and we're going to hear reports of millions of people dying. Keep in mind, the global warming is global. It's not just here in North America. It's all over the planet. And it is killing people as we speak. It is creating climate refugees as we speak. It is fueling wars as we speak. The whole Syrian conflict is a result of climate change. 1 million farmers in the north of Syria lost their farms as the desert moved south over the last 2 decades and claimed, thousands of square miles of fertile, arid land, turned it into desert. And what did those people do? There's 1 million plus Syrian farmers, small family farmers. What did they do? They had to go to the big cities and become beggars, basically, or take whatever job they could get. And that then and then at the same time, because the farms were shutting down, they were not growing wheat. The price of wheat went up, and the government had been subsidizing wheat. They had been subsidizing food to their people. And the Assad government, and Assad said, we can't afford this. And so he cut back the subsidies. Well, as soon as he cut back the subsidies, people said, hey, wait a minute. It's not my fault that I'm here. And they started protesting, and the first protests were met by Assad's soldiers shooting people, which was his first big mistake, or arguably his second big mistake. The first was cutting off the price supports for food. And that led directly to a civil war in Syria. It all started with climate change. You've got this massive destruction now down here. In 2000, this is an amazing little coda here that Mark Hurtisgaard adds to his article in The Nation. He says in 2008, John Podesta, soon to be Obama's transition director, organized a war game to test the responses to projected climate disruptions. Now, this is really interesting. This was 2008. That's, 9 years ago. John Podesta is running a war game to test the ability of the United States to deal with climate change-fueled climate violence. They used the best science available to predict where this would happen and where it would be the most destructive. And they came up with Houston. And in order to put it in a larger context, they figured while Houston was flooding, India should also be flooding. You got millions of refugees in India, 1 million people displaced in Houston. This was in 2008. This was their war game against climate change. Guess what? Just came true. Harvey dumped 27 trillion gallons of water. Seth Borenstein of the AP says that's enough to cover Manhattan a mile deep. Where did all that water come from? It came from evaporation. A lot of it came from evaporation out of the Atlantic. Why so much water? Because the atmosphere can hold more water, because of global warming, because the atmosphere is a degree warmer than it used to be, and because the ocean can evaporate much more moisture into the air than it used to because it's warmer. It's the Caribbean, the Gulf of Mexico, 7 degrees warmer than they used to be. Meanwhile, the head of the EPA, Scott Pruitt, has done away with President Obama's Clean Power Plan. Oh, yeah, it's just fine. Dump all the poison into the atmosphere you want. It doesn't matter if we pollute the planet. As long as the billionaires in the oil industry are richer, everything is good. Trump rescinded Obama's requirement that federal agencies take climate impacts into accounting when they're building major infrastructure. Because, hey, we don't need to be building bridges over rivers and calculate into how high the bridge should be, what the flood level of the river might be under these new climate change realities. Because we're pretending there's no such thing as climate change. If Republicans really believe this stuff, if they really believe this crap, they should all go to South Florida right now. Because, hey, climate science is a lie, right? It's these greedy scientists just coming up with stuff so that they can keep their jobs. So if climate science is a lie, don't believe what they're telling you about the weather. Oh, wait a minute. Rush Limbaugh already said that day before yesterday on his show. It's just a hype, right? This is just a hype. People are calling out Limbaugh right now saying, really? You're going to get people killed. People are dying because of climate denialism. People are dying because these corporations, the politicians they own, and the right-wing media that they support and that has this bizarre symbiotic relationship with them are all committed to increasing the profits of ExxonMobil, Koch Industries, and the rest of the fossil fuel bunch. That's what's going on here. And as a result of this, people are dying. And then to really rub salt in the wounds, NASA, which collects the information on climate, NASA, which runs the satellites that are telling us, many of the satellites, not all of them, but they certainly put them there and get them back down again. NOAA runs some of them, but NASA is, the big agency in charge of this stuff. Trump just appointed a guy to run NASA who's a climate denier and is not a scientist. He's just a right-wing hack. And Trump appointed him to run NASA. So, it's time for us to start calling out these people. It's time to start calling out these institutions, to start calling out the TV and radio shows that are lying to us about climate change, to go to town halls and call out the politicians who are lying about us, to vote for people who acknowledge climate change, to promote legal investigations into company and sue companies. In fact, it's happening in 3 states now to ExxonMobil that have been lying to us.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
It's time to hold these companies accountable. How about charging them a carbon tax for their externalities? welcome back. Oops, wrong one. There we go. Okay, Dwayne, watching Free Speech TV in Warren, Michigan. Hey, Dwayne, what's on your mind
Hey, Tom. It's wonderful to talk to you. This is the second time I've called.
Well, thank you.
First time was for Congressman Pocan, so I didn't really get a chance to talk to you. But man, it's really an honor. You're so. I got more college than you, but you're smarter than I am. I'll tell you that by a mile. But anyways, it's so crazy how just humidity. You know, you've been in Michigan. You know, like we're a humid kind of state. It's so crazy that like humidity is causing all this climate change. But you know, I just called my Congress people and my senators today and said, look, we got 3 hurricanes right now, and we just had a huge one that just took out Houston. Why aren't the Dems, like, screaming out climate change? And wouldn't it be a cool thing if Houston being an oil-based area, if all them cars, I've heard estimates of 150 to 500,000 cars are damaged, wouldn't it be a cool thing if they bought a whole bunch of electric cars and put in the infrastructure for that?
Yeah, that would be spectacular. Do a cash for clunkers kind of thing.
Yeah, for sure. You know, I mean, and electrify the area. Like, wouldn't that be an awesome incentive?
Yeah, there was a town in the Midwest, in Kansas or Oklahoma or somewhere along there, that was wiped out by a hurricane. This was about 8 or 10 years ago. And Leo DiCaprio came into this town and funded, in part, their rebuilding. And they've rebuilt it as an entirely green town. And all of their electricity is renewable. And, I mean, because they literally got wiped out, right down to zero. And they've rebuilt their town as a completely green town. And it's really a remarkable story. You can probably Google it. But if Houston did the same thing, said, hey, here's a great opportunity. We can rebuild the city. We can incorporate zoning codes and things like that. We can do it right this time. We can get back our wetlands so that we don't have flooding this bad. There's just a remarkable number of opportunities there. Yeah. But you called about Mick Mulvaney?
Yeah, you said something earlier about he got Trump's ear and they cut disability.
Yeah.
I'm on disability, so I was like, wait, what?
Yeah.
Maybe I missed that.
Trump's budget, they have not yet cut it. Trump's budget proposed cutting Social Security disability substantially. And when Trump had campaigned on the promise of we're not going to cut your Social Security or your Medicare or your Medicaid. And of course, his budget cut both Medicaid and Social Security. The only thing that Trump refused to cut was Medicare. And Mick Mulvaney, there's a news story about this a couple days ago. I retweeted it. If you follow my Twitter feed, you can find it. There's a story about this a few days. In fact, I retweeted it to Donald Trump over the weekend, as I recall. So, and the story was Mick Mulvaney is bragging out loud. I mean, he's bragging to the press about how he got Donald Trump to cut Social Security by telling him that the Social Security retirement part, that's Social Security. But Social Security disability, that's just a name. That's not actually Social Security. That's a welfare program. And Trump said, okay, well, it's a welfare program. You can go ahead and cut it. And so Mulvaney put into the budget the cuts for SSDI. So, Dwayne, I would suggest if you're on SSDI that you be calling both your senators and your member of Congress, and you might want to leave a message with the White House. You know, Mick Mulvaney, stop lying to Donald Trump. Dwayne, thanks a lot for the call, and thanks for watching Free Speech TV.
Hi, I'm Heather with Free Speech TV. Your support, whether through giving of donations, volunteering, or even spreading the word, has made it possible for the only independent progressive news network to sustain for more than 20 years. Now, you can give to Free Speech TV through the Branch of Gratitude. This program is a sustainable way to give that reduces waste through paper mailing, postage, and staff hours. By choosing to participate in the Branch of Gratitude, you are joining hands with the socially conscious community and sending a message to the world that Free Speech TV is not only here to stay, it is here to thrive. Please call 877-378-8669 or go online to freespeech.org. Make a difference and join the Branch of Gratitude today.
today. Welcome back. By the way, somebody tweeted this to me this morning. You can read it on my Twitter feed. I don't have it in front of me, so I don't have their name. I just printed out the graphic, but thank you to whoever did that. It's from 2014, and it is the OECD countries, the Organization of Economic Cooperation and Development, and it lists their taxes as a share of gross domestic product. And the OECD average is 34%. 34% of the entire GDP is taxes. So basically, the government sector is 34%. In the United States, it's 26%. Taxes as a share of gross domestic product, 26%. We are, outside of Korea, Chile, and Mexico, we are the fourth lowest in the world of the OECD countries, the developed countries. So we're at 26%. Switzerland is above us at 27%, Austria 28%, Ireland 29%, Latvia 29%, Canada 32%, Israel 32%, Slovak Republic 32%, Japan 33%, United Kingdom 34%, Poland 34%, Estonia 34%, New Zealand 35%, Czech Republic 34%, Spain 34%, Portugal 34%, which, by the way, is the average for the OECD countries. Greece is 35%, Slovenia is 36%, Germany's 37%, the Netherlands 38%, Hungary 38%, Luxembourg 38%, Norway and Iceland 39%, Sweden is 42%, Austria is 42%, Italy's 43%. And then you get into the countries that everybody agrees have really, really high standard of living and a really high quality of life. Finland, 43%. Belgium, 44%. France, 44%. Denmark, 49%. Taxes as a percentage of GDP. We are one of the least taxed countries in the world. And the result of that, if you have ever traveled around the world, if you have a passport, if you've ever been to Denmark or Sweden or Norway or Switzerland or Germany or France, you know that those countries have infrastructure that is modern and gleaming. You can take their trains all over the country. You can travel 200-300 miles an hour. You can walk down the aisle with a glass of red wine in your hand and not worry that even one drop is going to spill on anybody. You try taking Amtrak, you better pour that wine into one of those containers with a straw on the top and everything. You know, I mean, it's just going to go everywhere, right? Their roads don't have potholes. Their airports are modern. But because we are one of the lowest taxed nations in the world, our infrastructure has completely gone to pot ever since Ronald Reagan cut our taxes. He cut taxes on rich people, he cut taxes on corporations, and he froze spending on infrastructure. We're now $4 trillion in the hole on infrastructure. And the Republicans now want to cut taxes? Really?
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
So we'll see how this one plays out. We'll be back with your calls.
Hey, it's Thom Hartmann. We're reading from A Dark Money, The Hidden History of the Billionaires Behind the Rise of the Radical Right in today's Thom Hartmann University Book Club. This is from Chapter 11, page 271. The official opening of the 112th Congress took place on January 5th, 2011, when Nancy Pelosi, the Speaker of the House, handed off an oversized ceremonial gavel to her successor, John Boehner. But a new era of ultra-conservative billionaire influence had already begun. Before the public swearing-in ceremony got underway, David Koch, whose donor network had spent at least $130.7 million on winning a Republican majority, was in the new Speaker-to-be's office, ornate office, chatting amiably with his staff. The People's House was under new management, and critics would suggest new ownership. While Koch was a very public presence on the Capitol, his political adjutant, Tim Phillips, the president of Americans for Prosperity, was deep in the inner sanctum of the congressional committee that mattered most to the bottom line of Koch Industries. Phillips's most important destination that day was the House Energy and Commerce Committee, which under the new Republican majority had now increased its power to block President Obama's environmental agenda in Congress. The committee could bury progress on climate change and harass the EPA for the foreseeable future. And then just jumping through a little anecdote about Lee Fong and David Koch, they continue. In Plutocrats, the rise of the new global super rich and the fall of everyone else, journalist Krista Freeland describes how those with massive financial resources almost universally use them to secure politics and policies beneficial to their interests, often at the expense of the less well-off. In the United States, a number of studies have shown that in recent years, this tendency has distorted politics in very specific ways. In a study he conducted for the nonpartisan Sunlight Foundation, the political scientist Lee Drutman found that increasingly concentrated wealth in America resulted in more polarization and extremism, especially on the right. Very rich benefactors in the Republican Party were far more opposed to taxes and regulations than the rest of the country. He discovered the more Republicans depend upon 1% of the 1% donors, the more conservative they tend to be. The 112th Congress soon unfolded as a case study of what David Frum, an advisor to the former President George W. Bush, described as the growing and, in his view, destructive influence of the Republican Party's radical rich. The radicalization of the party's donor base, he observed, has propelled the party to advocate policies that were more extreme than anything since Barry Goldwater and his 1964 presidential campaign. It also led Republicans in Congress to try tactics they would never have dared use before, end quote. Hard data supported this. Harvard's Theta Scott poll found that the House took the biggest leap to the far right since political scientists began recording quantitative measurements of legislators' positions. There was no better example than the Koch's newly won influence over the House Energy and Commerce Committee. In the previous Congress, the panel had been chaired by Henry Waxman, the liberal Democrat from California, who had quarterbacked the House's successful passage of the cap and trade bill, only to see it die in the Senate. Now the new Republican leadership stocked the committee with oil industry advocates, many of whom owed huge campaign debts to the Kochs. Koch Industries PAC was the single largest oil and gas industry donor to members of the panel, outspending even ExxonMobil. It had donated to 22 of the committee's 31 Republican members and 5 of its Democratic members, too. In addition, 5 out of the 6 Republican freshmen on the committee had received outside support from Americans for Prosperity. Meanwhile, many of the new committee members had signed an unusual pledge swearing fealty to the Koch's agenda. They promised to vote against any kind of carbon tax unless it was offset by comparable spending cuts, an unlikely scenario. The no climate tax pledge was invented by Americans for Prosperity in 2008, when the Supreme Court cleared the way for the EPA to regulate greenhouse gases as it does other pollutants. The Koch's pledge was modeled on the enormously successful one that the anti-tax crusader Grover Norquist had used to intimidate Republican lawmakers from raising taxes. But in this instance, it served not a cause so much as a company. By the start of the legislative session in 2011, fully 156 members of Congress had signed the Koch brothers' no climate tax pledge. Many returning members of the House Energy and Commerce Committee had already taken the pledge, and of the 12 new Republicans on the panel, 9 were signatories, including 5 of the 6 freshmen. A prime example of the symbiotic relationship between the Kochs and the committee was Morgan Griffith, who had defeated Rick Boucher in the district that represented Saltville, Virginia, and was among the new wave of appointees to the Energy and Commerce Committee who were openly indebted to the Koch brothers for their seats. Americans for Prosperity operatives were guests of honor at a victory rally soon after the election, at which Griffith gushed, quote, "I'm just thankful that y'all helped me out in so many ways," end quote. The Koch's investment soon paid off. Once in office, Griffith became an outspoken skeptic of mainstream climate science, drawing national ridicule for lecturing scientific experts as they testified before Congress that they needed to consider the possibility that Mesopotamia and the Vikings owed their success to global warming, and the melting ice caps on Mars showed that humans were not its cause on Earth. Congressman Griffith became a lead player in the House Republicans' war on the EPA, demanding that the agency be reined in. Within a month after he took office, he and other House Republicans gutted the EPA budget by a punishing 27%. Dark Money, The Hidden History of the Billionaires Behind the Rise of the Radical Right by Jane Mayer. Welcome back.
Bill in Sebastian, Florida. Hey, Bill, I hope you're going to be safe here with the hurricane.
I'm petrified, Tom. To be completely honest with you, I'm in a 35-foot trailer, and I have the shelter to go to down at the church here or the community center.
Are you? Where is Sebastian in Florida? Are you in northern Florida or something?
It's just north of Vero, about 20 miles north of Vero.
I'm sorry, I don't know where Vero Beach is. What Vero is?
Vero Beach is just 20 miles south of Sebastian, which is Central Florida.
Oh, it's in Central Florida. Okay. Well, hopefully you'll be okay. I just, if you can get out of the state, though, it seems like it might be a really good idea. Anyhow, what did you call about, Bill?
Well, it was more or less good news that they have one of the largest solar farms being erected right here north of Sebastian.
Oh, great.
And that's, a few of the people in the park are, working on the site.
Mm-hmm.
And they're getting a good wage, and they're all very happy. And I also wanted to comment on Mr. Sessions. And when I called his office, how I was put on hold, and I had to listen to When Johnny Comes Marching Home Again,
Really?
And that's what he has on his recording machine there. And I did have some words with his staffer. And,
this is at the Department of Justice?
No, this is when he was senator.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and I was just giving them my 2 cents about what I thought of Mr. Sessions.
Right.
And apparently they weren't too receptive. Yeah. So at any rate, the state of New York is having a problem with their retirees and with these Republicans. I just got something from the CSEA, the AFSCAM people. Mm. And I've been watching Rick Smith on Free Speech TV, and he's very good. And they're going to, right now, your pension is protected by the Constitution of the state of New York. Politicians in Albany can't touch it. They can't raise the pension fund to pay for other things. But that could change this year. Not many people know about it now. But this November, residents will vote on whether to hold a New York Constitutional Convention to rewrite the state constitution. Special interests and lobbyists are funneling a lot of money into the effort.
Yeah, they're doing this for the federal constitution, too.
With the audience and with the AFSCAM workers in New York to, make some noise over that because... times are rough. These are trying times. And I'd like to thank Mike Papantonio for his coverage of the antidepressant Abilify.
Mm.
I went like a lunatic for the longest time, Tom. They put me on that I took it twice. That was it.
Mm.
That was enough. I went off.
Yeah.
And I'm still in recovery from that post-traumatic stress syndrome, coupled with the fact that I just a year ago, June, had a car drive off Highway 1 right through my mobile home.
Oh, my.
I've been there since 1974. So I am still going through post-traumatic stress, and I can identify with these veterans and the rest.
Yeah, I'm with you. Bill, I've got to move along, but thank you for the call. Please keep safe. Take this hurricane deadly seriously. This thing is a killer. And, Limbaugh is totally wrong. This is not being hyped. It's not being exaggerated. Please take it seriously. Bill, I got to move along, but thank you for the call. Anita in San Antonio. Hey, Anita, what's up?
Hi, Tom. Yeah, I think it's a terrible mistake to think that anybody can work with Donald Trump. His life is littered with people who thought they could work with him.
Yeah.
Al Gore thought he could work with Donald Trump on climate change because Donald Trump said the right things to Al Gore.
Yeah.
The same thing with those dreamers that met with him. I think it was in January. And he said, don't worry, we'll take care of you, which is the same thing he's doing right now. That's until Steve Bannon gets into his ear or the rest of the right-wing white supremacists that he deals with, that he works with.
Oh, I'm not painting him as the savior of anything. I'm just saying that now that we've figured out how he works, there may be a way to exploit that.
No, I understand that, but that's just to work. Seriously, this guy sympathizes with white supremacists and neo-Nazis. I don't want to work with him on anything. I'm sorry. I don't want him to be successful. He needs to go down in history as the horrible, horrible president that he is.
So you would be willing to oppose legislation that might help millions of people in order to punish Donald Trump?
Well, you know, there were people that thought they could work with Adolf Hitler.
Well, that's not what we're talking about here.
Some good things. No, but this is the way. That's that way of thinking. Just like, you know, oh, we can work with him. We'll just, you know, ignore this part because he's building these nice roads or whatever.
Well, I'm not suggesting anybody ignore anything
like that. The presidency is not just about policy. It's about character and how he represents this country.
I don't disagree at all. You know, Anita, I agree with you in regard to almost everything. But if you know, we've got shutting down the government could lead to people dying. It might be slightly hyperbolic, but it's a destructive thing for the United States, and it hurts.
I agree. I don't have a problem with that, with the debt ceiling thing. But they didn't work with him.
If you don't have a problem with that, you're okay to work with Trump.
No, they didn't work with him. He went and he just okayed it, probably because he was bored with talking about it.
I think that's probably true.
Donald Trump does what he does, but he doesn't think. He's not thinking about why he needs, you know, who he's going to help, or he's always thinking about how it's going to help him. And the fact of the matter, Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer, they went along with it at that, and it would be okay if he did the DACA thing too, which, you know, I have no problem.
Which he did. I mean, this morning Nancy Pelosi called him personally. He took the call, and she said, "Would you please tweet something to reassure these young people?" And he did. And then, by the way, she also said that in her conversation, she tweeted this morning as well, Nancy Pelosi did, that in her conversation with Donald Trump on the phone this morning, he assured her that if Congress can pass the Dream Bill, you know, or some variation on it, she called it the DACA legislation, but you know, something that is the equivalent of DACA, that Donald Trump would sign it. So why not take
he's saying
that
now? But she's being manipulated now because he's not. You cannot trust a word he says.
Oh, I don't. I don't, Anita. I don't. I'm going into this completely clear-eyed. There's no illusions in my mind about who Donald Trump is and what he's all about. That said, if he's willing to promote a piece of legislation because the Democrats reached out to him and said, you know, we can help you, I don't have a problem with it. Everybody knows who he is. Everybody knows what he's all about. And if we can minimize the damage he's doing to the country, that seems to me like a good thing.
Well, yeah, but he's doing damage just by being there.
No, I don't disagree, but there's nothing we can do about that right now.
Well,
we have to,
I don't know about that. There are people that are trying to do something about that.
I know, and I support those efforts, but I think it's going to be a few months before Mueller's report comes out. And I think when it does come out, it's going to be devastating. My prediction is that Mueller's report is going to show that the Trump organization is basically a corrupt organization, that he's been running rackets his entire life. He's been running scams on people. He's been scamming bankers. He's been scamming countries, et cetera, et cetera. I just think that that's what's going to come back. But, we'll find out. Anita, I have to move along, but thank you. I respect your opinion. Thank you so much. Tina in Northampton, Mass. Hey, Tina, what's up?
Hey, Tom.
Hey, Tina.
Hi. So I'm calling because I don't understand why the Democrats don't seize the issue of climate disruption and run on a moonshot effort for rapid transition to 100% clean energy. I feel like the young people feel it deeply in their bones that we are stealing their futures with our generation's failure to act.
Yep, and they're seriously PO'd about it too.
Yeah. Yeah, and I feel like that's one of the ways that Bernie got so many people excited. He came right out and said, we're in a climate emergency.
Yes.
And I don't understand why they're still not seizing on that.
I get the press releases from all the prominent Democrats just because they send them out to the press and everything. And they're all talking about climate emergency. They're all talking about climate change. It's just none of it is breaking through into the press. It's not, Tina, that the Democrats are ignoring this issue. They're not. They've been aggressively pursuing this issue for years. It's that the more Koch Industries, ExxonMobil, Massey Energy, These other big fossil fuel companies, the more they throw millions of dollars at the television networks, particularly the cable networks, whereas a relatively small ad buy represents a large chunk of their budget, the more money that they keep throwing at these television networks, the more reluctant these networks are to even discuss climate change. There's a little clip that's gone viral on the internet. It's Ali Velshi interviewing a guy who is saying, hey, this is climate change, Ali, this is climate change. And all of a sudden they had to cut him off in the middle. And somebody called him out on it on my Twitter feed today. And Ali replies saying, oh, we lost the guy's connection. That happens, which is true. I mean, sometimes that happens. But, I replied to him saying, to Ali Velshi saying, it's time for a carbon tax to pay for this. That this is an externality of the fossil fuel industry, and they should be paying for the remediation. But he never replied to it. But in any case, I think that climate change is being taken on. But every time it gets discussed in the media, every time it gets discussed, even on MSNBC, which is more friendly to this topic than any others, there is a serious pushback, I think, frankly, from management. I doubt it's talent that's doing it, saying, yeah, we don't want to get in the middle of this controversy. We want to be advertiser friendly, quack, quack, quack. And I've heard these speeches before from advertising people as well. Tina, thank you for the call. But yes, Democrats need to be active.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit thomhartmann.com for audio and video archives.
Back with more of your calls. We're going to check in with Talk Media News, too. Welcome back. Vince in Pomeroy, Iowa. Hey, Vince, what's on your mind today?
Oh, I'm just thinking that we know that Donald is addicted to positive reinforcement and attention. So we need to feed that with his latest move and flood the White House with calls saying, great move, raising the debt ceiling. Great move, cooperating with the Democrats. Now, if you want to be remembered as the best president ever, get behind Medicare for all.
Yep, I have been pitching that, via a couple of people I know who know somebody who knows Trump, and I've been saying that on this program, and I get Anita's point. This guy is a short-fingered vulgarian, right? He's a horrible man. That said, if millions of people can be helped, if we can prevent one woman in Texas from dying of uterine cancer because she couldn't get Medicaid to fund a Pap smear, then it's been an effort worthwhile, and it'd be a lot more than one. It would be a lot of people. So anyhow, Vince, that's I agree with you. Well said. You wanted to say something else?
Oh, well, we know that he's a tool, but let's use him instead of just be worked upon.
Yeah, that's my take on it too. Vince, thanks for the call. John, watching Free Speech TV in Connell, Washington. Hey, John, what's on your mind?
Hello, Mr. Hartmann. I'm sitting here in the smoke.
Oh my!
Outside.
Still getting the ash and the smoke there.
Oh yeah. You got the Columbia Gorge, and then we got one on the Cascade foothills, and then up north by the Canadian border. And the only thing I want to say is, as far as I'm concerned, the Republicans who deny climate change are the worst terrorist organization in the world. And I think we ought to just take a plane load of them down to Gitmo, charge them for the ride down, and charge them rent.
I'm not going to disagree with that.
And that includes governors, too, who deny climate change or won't allow the language to be used.
They all know better. These guys are not idiots. They go to the doctor when they have a sore throat. They don't mind taking antibiotics. They watch the weather report. If they're in Florida, they're fleeing. If they were in Houston, they were running. They know that, the weather industry, as it were, actually knows what they're doing. And these people are telling us the oceans are warmer, the air is warmer, therefore the storms are more severe. This is global warming. We are seeing it in real time right in front of us right now. And you've got these Republican politicians purely so they can continue to take money from fossil-fueled petrobillionaires. You've got these Republican politicians who are lying through their teeth. And then even worse, I mean, those are just the liars. Then you've got, people like Ryan Zinke and Scott Pruitt and others in the Trump administration who are going out of their way to undo things like the rule that said that when you rebuild infrastructure that's been damaged by a flood, you have to consider the consequences of climate change, undoing things that will prevent future harms. So, yeah, I think terrorism is an awful strong word, and I don't think that we should be diluting that word. But and terrorism implies you're trying to inflict terror on a population. I don't think the fossil fuel companies ever wanted to inflict terror on a population, but they're doing it. They are absolutely doing it. They are responsible for death and destruction. There should be some specific liability for it. John, thank you for the call. Thanks for watching. We'll be right back with Victoria Jones. Welcome back. Let's check in with Talk Media News and find out what's going on in the world today. This report brought to you by goatsfortheoldgoat.com and Loving What You Do, a new book by Ellen Ratner. Victoria Jones is on the line with us. Hey, Victoria.
Hey, Tom.
So what's going on in the world today?
So the latest on what Hurricane Irma is doing is it is flooding parts of the Dominican Republic now as it is roaring by just off the northern coast of the island it shares with Haiti. And Haiti's northern coast will be next, and then it is heading for Cuba, where they're obviously taking it extremely seriously. They're fairly ready for it. There are some evacuations of some areas. Then it will be headed for the Keys, the Virgin Islands, St. Thomas, St. Martin, all these places, Barbuda, that have been so damaged. They are trying to deal with it. Some of these French territories, Dutch territories, British territories, those countries, they've got ships steaming in to help and considerable amounts of money coming in to help. But they are just incredibly battered. Meantime, we don't know at this point exactly the direction of the storm. Georgia's governor has ordered a mandatory evacuation starting Saturday from the Atlantic coast, including the city of Savannah. Georgia has not been hit by a hurricane with winds Category 3 or higher since 1898.
Wow.
South Carolina has declared a state of emergency. Now, the thing is, it was looking, I've been following quite closely because it's been looking like it's coming straight for Maryland, and I live in a basement with a little storm runoff lake outside my window.
Uh-oh.
So I've been following it very closely. Now, it's looking now as though it rips straight up Florida all day Saturday. And rather than going straight up the East Coast, it looks as though what it then does is it does go up through Georgia and North Carolina, but it's looking as though it makes a slightly leftward turn, Georgia, North Carolina, but then it starts to head a little bit at Kentucky, eastern Tennessee, and North Carolina, and taking in Virginia. So it seems to be going slightly inland, but it is so massive. I'm sounding like a meteorologist, and I'm only playing one on radio, but it is so massive that it doesn't matter.
Yeah. Yeah. And the other big question is, for the people, for example, you said there's ships at sea bringing supplies to people on the islands that have been wiped out by this thing. There's another hurricane right behind it called Jose.
Yes, Jose. Now, Jose, we're speaking so relatively now. Jose has been, I don't know if it still is. Yesterday it was a Category 1. It was strengthening, so I don't know if it's gone up to a Category 2. It is obviously still out in the Atlantic Ocean. It's looking like it would sweep by Florida and head up parallel to the East Coast, but then it looks like it would start to hit, if it's going to hit anywhere, round about the sort of mid-Atlantic region.
Which is where we are.
That is correct, Tom.
Wonderful. Okay, so what else is going on in the world?
Okay, other things that are going on in the world. We have some DACA news. That's the Dreamers news. Senate Republican Whip John Cornyn of Texas, who's the number 3 today, quickly threw cold water on efforts by Democrats to persuade President Trump to support a standalone bill known as the DREAM Act to protect the estimated 800,000 undocumented immigrants from deportation. Now, Senator Chuck Schumer spoke with President Trump today about moving this DREAM Act along. And what it would do is it would lift the threat of deportation from these young people, the dreamers.
Right, and just for, as a historical codicil here, the DREAM Act passed the House of Representatives handily, and it got 55 votes in the Senate. And there's only 100 senators. It got a majority of the Senate, according to the Constitution. It's law right now, except that the Senate has this filibuster rule, and a particular Republican senator stepped forward specifically to filibuster the DREAM Act and was successful. His name was Jefferson Beauregard Sessions III. He's the guy who led the filibuster against the DREAM Act. He's now the Attorney General and the guy who yesterday kicked out DACA. I have some serious doubts about the integrity of this particular evil Keebler elf.
Yeah, well, Cornyn actually cited Representative Steve King. He said that it was unreasonable to expect Republican leaders to move a bill that conservative critics like King call amnesty.
Right.
So, yeah. So that's where that is. Meanwhile, Education Secretary Betsy DeVos today announced that they are going to revamp Obama-era guidance for colleges and universities on how to handle sexual assaults.
Oh, she's going to tear apart Title IX?
Well, she didn't call it quite that, but it's along those lines, you would say.
So if you're a woman going to college, forget it. You're going to face some real serious problems if you want to charge somebody with sexual assault, because Betsy, what I read this morning is she came out and said we need to protect the people who have been charged with the crime as well as the victims.
That's what she said.
Yeah.
That's
Brilliant.
What she said.
I mean, we already do that. It's called guilt, innocent until proven guilty. But
Yeah, she did say she did say that.
Yeah.
McClatchy has an interesting story today about how backlogs, according to the head of the Defense Security Service, Daniel Payne, says that backlogs have led the federal government to issue interim clearances to individuals later discovered to be convicted murderers, rapists, and pedophiles. And now this is the agency responsible for overseeing temporary security clearances for the Pentagon.
Oh, my.
Yeah, so these are temporary clearances while awaiting their full background checks. I've got murderers who have access to classified information. I have rapists. I have pedophiles. I have people involved in child porn. This is the risk we are taking because of the backlogs.
Wow. Well, we've got over 1 million people who have top security clearances, too. I mean, you have to wonder, is all this necessary? Anyhow, Victoria Jones with Talk Media News. Thank you, Victoria.
Thank you.
Good talking. We'll be back.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by the Aiden Forecast, an investment newsletter with weekly updates of leading market indicators and a monthly deep dive into what the details of the economy and the markets mean for investors and retirees. On the web at aidenmarkets.com. Wines have some of the highest pesticide levels in our food chain. This hour brought to you by ecowine.com. Pesticide-free wines, organic wines, imported from France by the Organic Wine Company, ecowine.com. Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by Super Beets. Super Beets are sourced from non-GMO beets, and they're packed with dietary nitrates, helping to produce nitric oxide for more energy, stamina, and support for healthy blood pressure levels naturally. For more information, call 800-223-8242 or visit tomsbeets.com.
Hey, it's the Thom Hartmann University Book Club. Today we're reading from Jeffrey Sachs' new book, Building the New American Economy, Smart, Fair, and Sustainable. This is the preface. The foreword of the book, by the way, was written by Bernie Sanders. Donald Trump, this is from the preface, though, by Jeffrey Sachs. Donald Trump becomes president of a nation that is deeply divided by class, race, health, and opportunity. In his acceptance speech, Trump pledged to be the president for all Americans. He also gave a very promising hint of how to pursue that objective in practice. Trump is a real estate developer, so it's not surprising that his brief acceptance speech was dominated by the idea of rebuilding, a word he mentioned 4 times. And then here's the quote. Working together, we will begin the urgent task of rebuilding our nation and renewing the American dream. We are going to fix our inner cities and rebuild our highways, bridges, tunnels, airports, schools, and hospitals. We're going to rebuild our infrastructure, which will become, by the way, second to none. And we will put millions of our people to work as we rebuild it. End of quote from Trump. This is a valid, indeed uplifting perspective. America desperately needs rebuilding. Its infrastructure is decrepit. Its energy system is out of date for a climate-threatened economy. Its coastal areas are already showing grave vulnerability to rising sea levels and extreme storms. Its Rust Belt cities like Grand Rapids, Michigan are boarded up. Its inner cities across the country are unhealthy for the people being raised in them. Rebuilding America's cities and creating a 21st century infrastructure could be Trump's greatest legacy. Trump's pledge to make America's infrastructure second to none is a correct and bold goal for America's competitiveness, future job creation, public health, and well-being. Yet, as I will explain in this book, America today is certainly no longer second to none. On a recent Sustainable Development Goals Index, the United States ranked 22nd out of 34 high-income countries. For Americans returning from foreign travel, a well-known sign that they've touched down at home is that the elevators, escalators, and moving walkways of our once proud airports are out of order. A builder president could indeed help to restore vitality to the U.S. economy and put millions of people to work in the process. All of the major candidates in the 2016 presidential campaign pledged a major effort to rebuild America's infrastructure. Indeed, Trump suggested a hefty price tag of $1 trillion, which is a realistic sum and target for the coming 5 years, roughly 1% of national income every year. The keys to success in building a new American economy can be summarized in 3 words: smart, fair, and sustainable. A smart economy means deploying the best of cutting-edge technology. Our energy grid should be smart and economizing on energy use and incorporating distributed energy sources, such as wind and solar power, into the grid. Our transport system should be smart in enabling self-driving electric vehicles within our cities and 21st century high-speed rail between them. A fair economy would start with Trump's pledge to rebuild the inner cities. Such a pledge should include affordable housing, decent urban public schools and public health facilities, efficient transport services for low-income communities, parks and green spaces in places now burdened by urban blight, the cleanup of urban toxic dumps, comprehensive recycling rather than landfill, and safe water for all Americans so that the water drinking disaster that afflicts Flint, Michigan, and similar crises elsewhere are brought to a rapid end and never recur. A sustainable economy means acknowledging and anticipating the dire environmental threats facing America's cities and infrastructure. The vulnerability of New Orleans levees had been predicted by scientists and engineers long before Hurricane Katrina. The flooding of New York City had been predicted long before Hurricane Sandy. The risks ahead to the United States in the event of unchecked climate change can be found in countless scientific and policy studies, such as Risky Business and the National Climate Assessment. Much could go wrong in an undirected building boom that is not smart, fair, and sustainable. Trump's campaign pledges to restore the Keystone XL pipeline and U.S. coal production are cases in point. Investing in a boom in fossil fuels would be an expensive dead end. Such projects will inevitably be closed soon after they are completed, if not in a Trump administration, then in the ones that follow. They are simply untenable environmentally, no matter where the lobbyists assert, no matter what the lobbyists assert. Billions of dollars would be thrown down the drain to develop resources that will never be used. It's funny that climate deniers are chortling about the incoming Trump administration. Nature doesn't care what they think, and neither do the 192 other countries on the planet that signed the recent Paris Climate Agreement. Fossil fuel companies can spend money developing unusable resources, but they would be throwing money down the mine shaft, as would the investors buying the bonds financing such hapless projects. Trump made another very important pledge in his acceptance speech that should underpin a successful strategy for building a new American economy. He said, "I will harness the creative talents of our people, and we will call upon our best and brightest to leverage their tremendous talent for the benefit of all." America has nearly 5,000 colleges and universities across the country, including every congressional district. And with the finest collection of engineering and scientific faculty, this is Jeffrey Sachs now talking, faculty and knowledge in the world. These institutions of higher learning have schools of public policy, social work, public health, business administration, and environmental science. Most importantly, they have 21 million young Americans enrolled to gain expertise in the skills needed for leadership and skills for the 21st century. By harnessing the vast brain power and experience in our colleges and universities, in civil society and business, America could indeed enter an era of successful rebuilding, one that creates a smart, fair, and sustainable economy that is truly second to none and serves as an inspiration for other parts of the world. This is from Jeffrey Sachs. He wrote it in November of 2016, just right after the election, before the inauguration. The book, Building the New American Economy.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome back to the third hour of our program. Nikki Haley gave a speech at the hard right organization, the American Enterprise Institute, AEI. I used to debate Myron Bell from AEI, as I recall, and a number of other people. They actually used to, both AEI and Heritage used to be willing to send people to this program to debate me. It was their practice, right? Until I just, it's like they couldn't do it anymore. It's just, anyway. Nikki Haley gave a speech at AEI, this hard right group. And she said that the president, Trump, has the grounds, her word, has the grounds, to say that Iran is not keeping up with their part of the Iran nuclear deal that was negotiated with Britain and Germany and France and China and Russia and us. And, it wasn't just us, and it wasn't just Obama, but Obama had something to do with it, so the trumpets are all hysterical. Oh, my God, our black president did something. We got to get rid of it. We got to move it out. And she said that the reason why we can back out of this agreement, that we can declare them in noncompliance. See, the agreement requires that every month or every couple of months, every 90 days, every 3 months, the U.S. government, the president, actually, the executive branch, has to certify that Iran is in compliance with this deal. Trump has done this twice now. Twice. Iran is doing everything they agreed to. Now, they're also doing things that we don't like. They're still supporting Hezbollah. They're testing ballistic missiles. We don't like that. They're engaging in anti-American rhetoric. They're supporting rebels in Syria and in Lebanon. We don't like this stuff. And so what Nikki Haley is saying is that if we don't like what they're doing, that means that we can declare them in violation of this treaty. just because we don't like what they're doing, right? It's like I have a contract with Comcast to provide cable TV and internet service to my home, but they provide me with crappy service. I don't like it. So I can just call them up and say, I know I signed a 2-year agreement, but come get your box. What do you think they're going to do? They're going to say, fine, we'll get the box, and we're going to charge you $500 to penalize you for closing the agreement. In other words, but I don't like your service. I don't like the way you behave. Doesn't matter. It's not what the agreement says. Now, obviously, if you want to send your cable box back to Comcast, that's not going to provoke a world war. Nikki Haley and Donald Trump saying that Iran is not in compliance with this deal that was negotiated between Iran and 5 other countries, that could lead to a world war. And a big one. These guys are absolutely playing with fire. The Washington Post put together one of the most spot-on opinion pieces. This is by the editorial board. This is not an individual writer at the Washington Post. This is all of the editors. And they have editors who are liberals, who are conservatives, who are none of the above, who, politics is not their thing, whatever. This is the consensus of the editorial board at the Washington Post from what little I know about how it works there. And they write, they talk about how Nikki Haley says that, the president has the grounds to say that because of Hezbollah or the ballistic missile tests or hostility in the United States, Nikki Haley said, quote, "We must consider the whole jigsaw puzzle," she said, "not just one of its pieces." And then the op-ed says, she's wrong. And by the way, she is. While Iran indeed is engaging in some very worrisome pursuits, writes the editorial board of the Washington Post, the deal is confined to the nuclear program. As long as Tehran is staying within those limits, Mr. Trump has no reason not to certify compliance. And then they go on to talk about, if we don't like the way that Iran is behaving, there's a whole bunch of other things that we can do. We can get other countries to go along with us and sanction them. There's other ways we can mitigate Iran's other behavior. And they continue to write, just because a country ain't perfect, that doesn't mean we don't do business with them. In the national interest, the editors write, Washington has often held its nose and dealt with aggressive or unsavory governments, among them the Soviet Union, Russia, Pakistan, and Egypt. Ms. Haley misleads further, writes the Washington Post, when she argues that it would not constitute an American withdrawal from the deal if Mr. Trump didn't certify Iranian compliance. That kind of spin will convince no one. And it won't protect Mr. Trump for being blamed for whatever follows, including outrage from France, Britain, Germany, Russia, and China, which are parties to the agreement. There are days when it seems to me that this end-time Christian worldview that is held by some of the people in the Trump administration, and I don't know for certain, but, the reports that you get are that, Betsy DeVos is one of these fundamentalist Christians, or at least of the We Honor Rich People sect, right? The Betsy DeVos is that actually, one of these right-wing Christian pastors is now doing prayer services in the White House. I don't know if John Kelly put an end to it or not, but there, you've got a bunch of fundamentalists over there, and they're informed by this Revelations worldview that in the last days, God is going to punish all of us for our sins, and then the good among us will be removed from the earth because holy hell is about to descend and Jesus is going to return after that. And, the whole rapture and return of Christ and all this stuff. By the way, a theory that Christians did not subscribe to until about 200 years ago. This is a relatively recent interpretation of the Bible. And it is not embraced by Catholics. It's not embraced by most mainstream Protestant religions. It's just this fringe of fundamentalists. But they've got this idea that we live in the end times and that the end times require there to be war in the Middle East. Revelation talks about, war in Israel, that the second temple has to be created, that there has to be such a horrible war in Israel that only 144,000 Jews are left, and that they all convert to Christianity at the end of the moment, right? This is the stuff that is being preached in Christian, in some hard right Christian churches in the United States. And this is apparently the direction that Nikki Haley is going. Is we're going to have war in the Middle East, damn it. We got to have war in the Middle East. It's time. It's time for Jesus to come back. And maybe he'll kill all those evil Muslims in the process and take out some Hindus and some Buddhists too. This is dangerous, dangerous stuff. Joe Cirincione's organization, the Plowshares organization, just put out a press release. Nikki Haley laid the Trump administration cards on the table this week with a new proposal aimed at sabotaging one of the Obama administration's most important diplomatic initiatives, writes the New York Times editorial board. I was just sharing with you the Washington Post. This is the New York Times. The whole idea makes no sense to anyone but Mr. Trump's hardline advisors, who see Iran as the root of evil in the Persian Gulf. The president would give Iran an excuse to revive what had been a rapidly advancing nuclear capability and confront the world with another intractable nuclear challenge, in addition to North Korea. This is the Plowshares Fund that Joe Cirincione is the head of. Europeans stand by the Iran deal. They're saying no. No, thank you. Nikki Haley, stop talking like that. Yes, you're talking to, a bunch of right-wingers who are funded by right-wing petro-billionaires and all this kind of stuff, but stop talking like that. Barbara Slavin for the Atlantic Council's Iran Insight blog says, appearing at a Washington think tank on Tuesday, UN Ambassador to the UN Nikki Haley laid out what appeared to be the rationale for the Trump administration to walk away from the Iran deal next month. Such a unilateral U.S. move would undercut the value of sanctions as a tool of foreign diplomacy. A tool is needed more than ever to deal with other crises, especially North Korea's escalating nuclear brinksmanship. When I look at Donald Trump gleefully ordering Patriot missile strikes on Syria while he's having dinner with the president of China, by way of saying, see, I could kill some people. When I look at Donald Trump demagoguing the issue of Iran simply because our first black president was, a participant in negotiating that deal. And it's become so obvious to all of us that anything that Obama did, Trump is going to try and undo. Good, bad, ugly, doesn't matter. Which is no way to run a country. It's stupid. It's a stupid way to run a country. When you look at this, you just have to conclude that this infection of our body politic by right-wing fundamentalist Christianity, the particular bizarre sect of right-wing fundamentalist Christianity that believes that we are in this generation in the last times and Jesus is going to return anytime soon. Getting ready for the rapture here, folks. That group corrupting American politics and pushing us to support, in some cases, outrageous behavior by our allies and to fight against even reasonable behavior by people that we consider our enemies. I'm speaking here specifically of Israel and Iraq, or Iran, excuse me. That strain of right-wing Christianity, this is exactly what Jefferson and Madison were worried about. A government operating on the basis of religious beliefs. This could be the thing that leads us into World War III. That's how crazy and how dangerous these people are. And I think it's a serious risk, and it's not getting anywhere close to the attention it should be getting. But these people are heading us in the direction of the war. And I think Trump is gleefully.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
He looks at FDR and how famous and popular he was and goes, yeah, because he was the last president to really win a war. I want to do that too. Oh, he was famous and popular. And welcome back. Let's see here. Carol in Monessen, Pennsylvania. Hey, Carol, what's on your mind? Thanks for watching Free Speech.
How are you doing?
Good. What's up?
That insanity just keeps going on and on and on. I'm telling you.
Yep.
And I don't think that Trump is ever going to rest easy until he unfolds everything, rolls back everything that President Obama ever did that was good for this country.
I don't think he's ever going to rest easy, period. I think he's a tortured man. Forgive my interrupting.
Pardon?
I said I don't think he's ever going to rest easy. I agree with you. That's his ultimate goal is to strip anything from our first African-American president's legacy that he can. But I don't think he's ever going to rest easy. I think he's a tortured man. I think he's a twisted, tortured, sick little man.
He has to be a tortured man. And I'm glad you pointed out that Catholics don't believe in all that nonsense that they're preaching.
Yes.
Because we do not. But the reason I called you was to say that you were talking earlier about Trump's ego. And I think that the most important thing to understand about this man is his malignant narcissism. And I believe that we can play into that. So what I've been doing for about 4, maybe 5 months is tweeting him on a fairly regular basis and telling him that, you know, if he wants to go down as the most beloved president in the country, that he could become the next Tommy Douglas if he gave us, you know, single-payer Medicare or single-payer.
Yep.
And Tommy Douglas, they build monuments to him in Canada.
Yep.
So it wouldn't hurt. It can't hurt.
Yeah, well, this is the debate essentially that I got in with Anita in the last hour is, you know, do you work with evil to accomplish good if you believe that you can, or do you simply walk away from evil and say, I'm going to wait for good people to come along and I'll only work with them? And, you know, I'm a little more pragmatic on this.
Argument.
Pardon?
That's a good argument to get into, isn't it?
Yeah, well, it's a tough argument because, you know, there are no perfect people. There are no perfect countries, you know, and the few people who are constantly waiting for the perfect ones to come along are, you know, inevitably disappointed. On the other hand, Trump has demonstrated that he's perfectly willing to look you right in the face and lie. I mean, he's, you know, over and over again to crowds of thousands of people. And then when he gets busted for it, he lies about what he got busted for. And so, you know, I get that. It's like, you know, trying to do business with a cobra. You know, it's like, okay, we're going to try and do a little performance here, Mr. Cobra, for all these people who want to see me doing snake charming. And but please don't bite me. It's dangerous. I get it.
He's very dangerous. He really, really is. And as for what he is doing with Ryan, who is another dangerous man, I don't think that he is so much as having him over for dinner as having him for dinner. I think he's out to get both Mitch and Ryan for disagreeing with him or saying something against him that he doesn't like, because he does go out for vengeance.
Oh, he does.
I think his next course might be turtle soup.
Yeah. I think he might be thinking that he can seduce them, basically, that he can ingratiate himself with them, and they'll start behaving nicely. He doesn't realize they're always going to put politics above him. He's temporary. He's going to be gone in 3 years. They know it. They're going to make sure of it, and maybe before 3 years. But you know, I don't think Trump realizes that. Carol, thanks for the call. Great to hear from you. Excellent turtle soup. I love it. Thank you. We'll be back.
Hi, I'm Valerie with Free Speech TV. We're proud to provide you with independent, unfiltered news and documentaries. And as our valued viewer, you can help us continue bringing Free Speech TV well into the future. Join our Pearly Gate Rebels, our planned giving program. Your gift of any size will help ensure democracy endures through an informed citizenry. You can donate property, money, or assets. It's easy. My spouse and I are proud Pearly Gate rebels. We're doing our part to ensure that Free Speech TV will be here to deliver thought-provoking news and information well into the future. Join us. Call 877-378-8669 or email me at valerie@freespeech.org. Rebel against media owned by billionaires and become one of our Pearly Gate rebels today.
Welcome back. Oh, my. Let's see here. Dwight in DeSoto, Missouri. Hey, Dwight, what's on your mind today?
Hi, Tom. Can you
Hey,
hear me?
Dwight. Just fine. What's up?
Okay. Hey, I just wanted to say you got the best program on the planet.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I got a quote for you. It come from the Godfather, you know. Keep friends close, enemies closer. That's what Trump's doing right now. He's a bully and a monster.
Yeah.
And I got a suggestion for you, Tom.
Mm.
I suggest we dump Trump and flush Rush.
Yeah. Yeah, a little alliteration. Yes, fine idea. Dwight, thanks for the call. Well said. Jim in Lombard, Illinois. Hey, Jim, what's on your mind?
Hi, Tom. My words to describe the state of affairs are that greedy, miserly misanthropes have been in power for off and on for a while. And what they want to do now is privatize everything. They're trying to turn the whole country into a company town where the company owns everything and charges overinflated prices for the necessities of life. Like the old song, I owe my soul to the company store.
Yep. I agree.
That's all I wanted to say. I'll let somebody else go on.
Okay. Thanks a lot, Jim. Good to hear from you. Ben in Talent, Oregon. Hey, Ben, you're on the air.
Hi, Tom.
Hey, Ben.
Can you hear me?
Yep. What's up?
Yeah, it's Dan, actually.
Oh, Dan, I'm sorry.
So just cut to the chase. Trump is horrible, terrible, disaster, dangerous. Now, I want to talk about elections because as you're familiar with the Oregon election system, the vote-by-mail system, we have the highest turnout in the country, even on off elections.
Right.
In the last off election, we had 66% turnout, and the rest of the country had 33%.
Yep.
It's really hard to cheat. There have been no findings of voter suppression, no cheating.
So, Ben, we've got 30 seconds, so we're going to hit a break here. What's your solution? What's your call for action?
The country to start looking at Oregon's vote by mail because it's been successful for 20 years.
Washington State is next door, and they looked at it and they said, holy cow, this works. And so they adopted it.
It does work. So the other thing real quick is that I want to promote the idea of a laugh-in against Sessions, the so-called Attorney General.
Right.
During the woman's trial that they're trying to persecute. And during the trial, and maybe even out in front of the Justice Department.
Yeah, there have been. They were protesting in front of Sessions' office yesterday. I mean, people are really upset about this. You know, being prosecuted for laughing at Jeff Sessions at the Keebler Klansman.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
Well, I should probably apologize to Keebler for that. We'll be back. And welcome back to our Thom Hartmann University Book Club. Today we're reading from Devil's Bargain by Joshua Green, the subtitle Steve Bannon, Donald Trump, and the Storming of the Presidency. This is from the afterword, the very last chapter. It's titled Kali Yuga, which in Hinduism is when the earth goes into a phase of destruction. In the shell-shocked aftermath of the election, President Obama, looking shaken, appeared in the White House Rose Garden to deliver public remarks intended to project a sense of calm. A sense, really, that the basic stability of our country remained intact. Sun is up, Obama said. I know everybody had a long night. I did as well. Had a chance to talk to President-elect Trump last night about 3:30 in the morning, I think it was, to congratulate him on winning the election. End of quote. The next day, when the two men appeared together in the Oval Office, it felt as if the world had slipped through the looking glass. Trump quickly named Bannon his chief White House strategist. Republicans controlled every branch of government. With Trump's ability to defy every political norm, anything seemed possible. Who could argue otherwise after what had just transpired? And yet, within days of his inauguration, Trump's White House was plunged into chaos and scandal from which it has not recovered and may never. Bannon, the imaginative reconceiver of U.S. politics, hung streams of paper listing Trump's promises from the walls of his West Wing office. His strategy, as always, was to launch furious attacks, this time to, quote, shock the system, end quote, and rapidly reorient the federal government in a more nationalist direction. He called this, with what I took to be intentional irony, a shock and awe approach to asserting Trump's power. But Trump's flurry of activity quickly ran into problems. There was his executive order, sprung a week after his inauguration, banning immigrants from 7 majority Muslim countries, which set off nationwide protests and was blocked by the courts. His firing 2 weeks later of National Security Director Michael Flynn for contacts with the Russians. The collapse of his first major legislative initiative, a bill to repeal Obamacare. His firing of FBI Director James Comey, and the swift descent of the West Wing into a viper's nest of backstabbing and leaks. This quick turn toward a crack-up was hardly unforeseeable or even altogether surprising, but it contrasted sharply with the success of a candidate who had dominated his opponents, shaped news coverage, and shown himself to be all but impervious to the forces that overwhelm other politicians. Bannon, whose wild gambits in the campaign had invariably paid off, seemed to run out of magic tricks when Hillary Clinton was no longer a target. The government wasn't as malleable to Trump and Bannon's aggressions as the Republican Party and the cable news channels had been, and they found themselves consistently thwarted and undermined by the courts, by right-wing hardliners in Congress, by their own inexperience and Trump's errant tweets, and by the bureaucracy they were now overseeing. The crises these failures precipitated in the White House cost Bannon much of his influence and soon threatened Trump's presidency. While it's still early in his term, the possibilities that Trump's most ardent supporters once imagined for his presidency already seem to be mostly foreclosed. I think there are 3 main reasons why Trump's administration has so quickly fallen into disorder and confusion. Number 1, Trump thought being president was about asserting dominance. Just after he'd locked up the GOP nominations, Trump said something to me that crystallized his view of politics and explains, to my mind, much of his subsequent difficulties. Quote, I deal with people that are very extraordinarily talented people, he told me. I deal with Steve Wynn. I deal with Carl Icahn. I deal with killers that blow these politicians away. It's not even the same category. This, he meant politics. This is a category that's like 19 levels lower. You understand what I'm saying? Brilliant killers. Trump was equating politics with business and the presidency with the job of being a big shot CEO, a killer. He filled the upper ranks of his administration with people of a similar mindset. Gary Cohn, Wilbur Ross, Steve Bannon, aggressive, domineering men accustomed to getting their way by dint of their position. None had government experience, nor did many others in the West Wing. So none anticipated the problems this approach to governing would cause. Trump's self-conception as the all-powerful apprentice boss blinded him to a fundamental truth of the modern presidency, that the president needs Congress more than the Congress needs the president. Trump's domineering instinct served him poorly, since most members of Congress are secure in their jobs and accountable mainly to their own constituents. And it backfired disastrously when Trump fired Comey after he refused to submit to a pledge of loyalty to his boss. Number 2, Trump ran against the Republican Party, Wall Street, and Paul Ryan, but then took up their agenda. Populists often struggle to govern, but Trump scarcely attempted to lead the populist revolution that he promised. In May, he told me he would transform the Republican Party into a workers' party. But while he kept voicing populist shibboleths, the legislative agenda he took up was the standard conservative fare pushed by Paul Ryan. During the GOP primary, Trump has shrewdly sensed its weak point, Ryan's desire to finance tax cuts for the rich by cutting programs like Social Security and Medicaid, harmed the party's white blue-collar base. Trump told me he'd made this point to Ryan directly. He said, quote, "There's no way a Republican is going to beat a Democrat when the Republican is saying we're going to cut your Social Security and the Democrat is saying we're going to keep it and give you more." The book is Devil's Bargain by Joshua Green, Steve Bannon, Donald Trump, and the Storm of the Presidency. Welcome back. The Hartmann Report, hartmannreport.com, is our free news site where you can actually comment on news stories. The whole community that's growing and building around that website. No ads, no cost, no nothing. And we also now have a free podcast, which is available over at the iTunes store called The Hartmann Report. So that's what's up on this end. Let's check in with what's up on yours. Ted in Chicago. Hey, Ted, what's on your mind today? Ted? Listening on WCPT? Ted, you got to listen to your radio, not your... you got to listen to your phone, not your radio. There is a time delay here. Ed in Hillsborough, North Carolina. Hey, Ed, what's on your mind today?
How you doing, Tom?
I'm well.
I wanted
What's
to
up?
thank you for a couple of things. First of all, for the way that you cut through all the noise and static and get right to the issue. And secondly, you made a prediction last year that I've been clinging to and seems to be absolutely correct. You said if Donald Trump was to win the election, he would destroy the Republican Party, and it seems to be exactly what he's doing.
Yes. I think so. Although I would add, Ed, that the Republican Party has already been destroyed by the Koch network. The Republican Party has turned into the party of climate denial. They're the flat Earth society, essentially. They have become just complete shills and toadies for the billionaire class to the point of embarrassment. I mean, it's amazing to me. Every night of the week on television, and will for I'm ending my TV show at the end of this month. But, for the last 6 years or so, every night I've been debating conservatives on TV. It's getting increasingly difficult to find conservatives who are willing to debate me on television or who are willing to debate me on radio, anywhere, because they're so embarrassed by what's going on, or at least Republicans. They're so embarrassed by how their party has been taken over by people who call themselves conservatives but are not. They're just shills for power and wealth. Anyhow, back to you, Ed.
Yeah, that's exactly. But, I'm just so encouraged by the damage he's causing the current Republican Party. It's just unbelievable.
Yeah. The schisms
I was afraid that once he got in, he was just going to be a puppet for them. But I can't believe how badly he's performing.
Yeah. We'll see where this goes. But and I keep saying, Ed, at some point he's going to step over the line, and that's probably going to be cooperating with the Democrats on something more consequential than just the debt limit raise. And when he does that, the Republicans are going to be willing to impeach him, and then we'll see what happens. Because at that point, the Democrats might say, well, Mike Pence won't work with us. Maybe we better keep Trump in. But then you got the problem of you've got a dangerous, unstable, crazy guy as president. What do you do about that? And so. I don't know. There's no easy answers here. It's a time for us all to just keep very wide awake and pay attention. Ed, thank you for the call. By the way, I've been thinking about this continuously since yesterday. Or not continuous. It keeps popping into my mind. Last night, I even woke up in the middle of the night thinking about it. A woman called yesterday and said that she is doing all this, great stuff. She's, showing up at her Democratic Party meetings, and she's been out canvassing for MoveOn.org or Democracy for America or Our Revolution. I forget all the groups that she was part of. She's really doing the work. And she said, sometimes I just feel like we're not getting the success we need, and I feel despair. And my counsel to her was to be more engaged, essentially, that being engaged counters feelings of despair. And that's, that's a very well-known psychotherapeutic reality. You can get people engaged, even in something as simple as a hobby, then it can be an antidote to certain types of depression, situational depression, situational despair. And The more I think about it, the more I think, even looking at my own life, there have been times when I just checked out. From 1978 until 1983, Louise and I moved to New Hampshire and started a community for abused kids. And during those 5 or 6 years, we did not have a television. In fact, we did not have a television from 1978 until 2001. We had no TV all the years that we were raising our kids. And so I've got this huge cultural empty spot. I can't, when I play Trivial Pursuit, I always get wiped out when it comes to 80s and 90s sitcoms. But, we just kind of separated ourselves from the whole political thing, at least in a big way for those 5 years, and immersed ourselves in what I thought of as spiritual work. And I've done that before in my life. When I was 18, my friend Clark and I went up to the Upper Peninsula of Michigan with a couple of teepees. An old trapper took us 3 days back into the Chippewa National Forest to Duck Lake, which you can find on some maps of the Upper Peninsula, not most. And, set up our teepees and spent the summer there all alone. In fact, 3 days out of the week, we didn't talk. We used chalkboards to communicate. We were practicing, spiritual practice. We were reading the Bible, the Bhagavad Gita, a bunch of old Edgar Cayce books, Be Here Now by Ram Dass. And so I want to reconsider my advice. I don't know, I'm sorry I don't remember the name of the woman who called yesterday, and I don't know if you're watching or listening right now. But there are times when all of us just need to take a break and step back a step and say, right now that's burning my hands when I handle it. It's just a little too hot for me. I'm going to do something else for a while. And just take a little time off, take a vacation, jump into make pottery or something. There's all kinds of stuff that we can do with our time. Or even just take a couple of weeks, and take a break from it. The world will still be here when you get back. At a certain level, we take ourselves too seriously, I think sometimes. Yes, it is important that we be involved. It is important that we be engaged. Every vote counts. Every phone call to Congress is something that is consequential. And yet, at the same time, if you back out for a little bit, the world is not going to end. So I don't know if that advice is of any value to you or not, or even counter-valuable. I don't know. It's easy to give advice. It's a hell of a lot harder to take it. I get that. But anyhow, I wanted to share that thought with you. I've been thinking for a day and a half, or since yesterday afternoon. I really should have expanded my thoughts on that. Anyhow, Chris in Capitola, California. Hey, Chris, what's on your mind today?
Hey, how you doing?
Great. What's up?
I hear you say you're going to quit your TV show?
Yeah, we're gonna stop doing the TV show at the end of September.
Well, other than, I don't know what your reasons are, but you're a great service to the world community, man. You're doing a great service.
Well, the TV show that you're watching right now, Chris, you're watching us on Free Speech TV. We call this our 3-hour radio show. This show is going to continue. What's going to end at the end of next month is the show that I've been doing for RTTV for the last 6 years, from 7 to 7:30 at night.
Hey, anyway, listen, I'm a born-again Christian, and I was, when I became a Christian, they taught us about the rapture and all that, and then I've learned, like you, more or less, it's kind of dubious because it's a new thing in this spiritual teachings of any religion. And I just wanted to say, I think most of these Christians don't realize what happened to chapter 13, without love, you're nothing. Or when the other verse, I'm not kind of guy to quote verses because I don't know them, the numbers and chapters, but, it says God hasn't given us the spirit of fear, but of love, power, and a sound mind.
Yeah, I think that's Paul in the Romans, isn't it?
I don't know where it's at, man.
Yeah.
I just know it's in the New Testament.
Yeah.
But and the apostles and Jesus himself give us this example of, don't do your will, do God's will, and love those around you, and accept everyone. God accepts everyone, gives us all choices, and God is love. And I don't, do we need reminding of that or what?
I think we do. And that's why people go to church every week. In part because we need reminders, in part for community, in part for inspiration. And other people who are not religious, find other ways to do that. They go into the forest, or they look up at the sky, or, they look in their child's eyes or their spouses or whatever. We all find our inspiration.
Looking at the dollar bill.
Say what?
It's not by looking at a dollar bill.
Yeah, well, that's the danger, and you know, it's interesting, Chris, the kind of spirituality of money. Maybe 3 months ago, there was a woman who called in and said that she never had much money in her life, and she never much paid attention to it. And in the last couple of years, she's made a fair amount of money to the point that she's got, you know, a bunch of money in savings, and she finds that every day or every other day, she's you know, online going and checking her, you know, Fidelity or E-Trade or whatever it is, checking her account, you know, to look at her money. And that this doesn't seem like a good idea. This is love of mammon, you know. And ever since she said that, I've noticed how often I look at my own checking account or my credit cards or whatever, and I'm trying to just disconnect from caring about it, you know, and just say, okay, you know, things are going to be the way they're going to be. But it's like, it's not money is the root of all evil. It's love of money is the root of all evil. And going back to my rant, Chris, thank you for the call. It's great to hear from you. Going back to my rant about the Republican Party having been basically co-opted by billionaires and big corporations. Billionaires and big corporations are animated by the love of money. And so I would argue, and it's the love of money that is causing all these Republicans to say and do what the billionaires are telling them to say and do. This is a spiritual
You're
crisis.
listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
It is definitely a political crisis. It's definitely a moral crisis, but I would think that I would suggest it's also a spiritual crisis. And welcome back. Holbert in Pearlington, Mississippi. Hey, Holbert, what's up?
Hi, Tom.
Hey.
Well, I connect history's dots in a slightly different pattern from you. Well, first I should say I'm not a Republican troll. I voted against both New York candidates, knowing full well I wasn't electing anybody. But the idea was not to elect anybody because I don't like either one of them. Anyway, I think that what we've got now is nothing new. I think they weren't billionaires then because the dollar was worth many times more than what it's worth now. But the millionaires, the robber barons of the 19th century, their system never got as reformed as we would like to believe it did. I think they outmaneuvered us. I think they're still in charge today. The same names are still there. The Rockefellers, Morgans, their interests continue on.
Yep.
I mean,
there have been a few added to it. Now it's the Waltons and the you know, et cetera. But yeah,
that's true. But anyway, they're still in charge. They've been in charge all along. They discovered how much fun war is with World War I. Well, they gave us the Spanish-American War, which was completely unnecessary.
Yep.
Spain wasn't our enemy. They didn't blow up the Maine. It blew up all by itself from all the evidence.
Yep.
World War I, we had no business in that. I think the British tricked us into that one. And, we had no business in the Second World War either. But the billionaires, they do not have an ideology. They're not libertarians. Dick Cheney isn't a libertarian. Neither is W. They have no ideology.
They have the ideology of plutocracy.
Yeah.
They believe in a ruling class. They believe in kind of a Darwinian, although Darwin didn't believe in this, but his nephews, Herbert Spencer certainly did, the economist who popularized these ideas, Darwinian economics. They believe that they are born to leadership. They believe that their riches are proof of superiority. So there is a theology associated with Holbert.
They've been successful for 120 years.
Yeah.
And I think that we need to focus. We need to stop thinking about ideology and de-emphasize left wing versus right wing, because I think most of that's theater designed to distract us. What we need to do is focus on the things that will fix things. And one of the biggest ones is technology. And the way to control that and pry their fingers loose from the control they have on it now is a use or lose clause in patent law. They shouldn't be able to buy a patent, stuff it in a vault, and never sees the light of day again.
Completely agree.
Yeah,
completely agree. And I think we also need to shorten the time that patents last for, and copyrights and trademarks.
I wouldn't argue with that either. And
Yeah.
the other is, I think we need antitrust action against the oil companies to make them
Yes.
divest themselves of interest in
And
the
not
oil.
just the oil companies. We need antitrust action in media. We need antitrust action in internet. We need antitrust action in banking. We need it in retail. We need it in manufacturing. There's virtually not an industry in the United States since Reagan stopped enforcing the Sherman Act in '82 that has not turned into essentially a monopoly. Our airlines, on and on it goes. And that's why it's such a big deal that in the better deal that the Democratic Party has put together, one of their top things is monopoly, breaking up big monopolies. That's huge. That is huge. That's like the dog chasing the car and finally grabbing it. That's absolutely huge. Holbert, thanks a lot for the call. We'll be back. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you and Dave in Armstrong Creek, Wisconsin. Hey, Dave, what's up?
Hey, Tom, thanks for getting me in. I just wanted to talk about the Koch network's influence on climate change.
Mm-hmm.
The Americans for Prosperity, the Cato Institute, the American Petroleum Institute, they're all connected. And I'm about 2/3 of the way through Jane Mayer's book,
Dark Money.
Dark Money, and I just coincidentally got done with the climate change chapter. And they talk about how the deniers got their funding and to start with, and how they put a target on Michael Mann's back, and discredited all his research and just the things that they're doing. And I just wanted to bring out the Americans for Prosperity probably gives money to every Republican in Wisconsin, and they don't exactly come out and deny it, but they just say the science isn't settled,
Right.
which to me is just as bad.
No, it's worse. It's worse. If you deny it, people can say, no, it's like you're saying the earth is flat. But instead they're saying, well, maybe the earth is curved. Maybe it's not curved as much. Maybe we're not really sure. And then you look around and you go, well, yeah, I don't see any curve. Okay. Maybe there's a debate here. Their goal is the same as the tobacco industry, which is to spread uncertainty and doubt. And those are their words.
Well, that's how they get everybody to, vote for them, because, well, they're not denying science, but they're, but there's a lot of good people out there that vote for these people. I know them.
Oh, yeah, they get suckered into it. And, Dave, by the way, it's not just climate change that they're lying to us about. They're lying to us about the impact on cutting taxes on billionaires.
Oh, everything.
They're lying to us about the impact of regulatory activity, of regulations. They're lying to us about what causes banking crises. The list just goes on and on and on. I mean, they're lying to us about who's supporting terrorism and who isn't in the world. I mean, it blows my mind. Dave, I got to move along, but thank you for the call. Well said. Polly in Smith River, California. Hey, Polly, what's on your mind?
Hey, Tom. First of all, thanks for all your passion with the Golden Rule as I see your life and work.
Thank you.
I am calling. I'm a privileged elderly woman that went to Selma, which changed my life. I'm involved with Indivisible and marches and petitions. And I want to segue to the people that are discouraged and despairing, because I've been amongst them. And what I did, it's sort of segueing to what you said a minute or two ago, is I pulled out for a little while and just submerged myself in nature out here on the coast of Oregon and California, and just weighed in a little, but healed myself a little bit. And now what I'm ready to do is use my skill set, which goes back to teaching, in ways that I'm just figuring out how to do with young people, and come in and know that I have a lot of skills to offer as an assistant, as a coach, as somebody who steps in at libraries. And I want to encourage people to know that they have skills, and maybe they have something they never did while they were raising kids or having a career, and they can come in and do that, which will empower people to have enough of a passion to care about the planet, to care about each other, and to just feel more healthy.
Yeah, the bottom line is that it's really hard for people who are badly wounded to be effective. You've got to get yourself healthy mentally, emotionally, before you go to war, essentially, or before you go to battle. I'm not a big fan of war metaphors, but I lack another one right now. And you know, that can be a challenge. That can be a challenge.
I'm now in a rural, fairly conservative area versus where I live part of the year. And what I'm noticing is, because we have a lot of fires out here in the Northwest, that I am coming into contact and folding laundry for firefighters with people who are very opposite to me. And we start to know each other, and we start joking. At first they put me off, and then I tease them, and then we end up finding characteristics we like, and we're working together.
Right.
And so that's all I'm saying is, even I still feel very discouraged and wounded on a lot of days, not in a deep mental way, just, you know, right
It's
now.
the human condition.
And I just think that we can use this moment with both Houston and what's going on in Florida to use our skills. And women never think they have a skill set if they raised kids and stayed home. They do. And the older ones, middle ones, all of them that have any time, just use it to somehow do something you think you're pretty good at, and bring a good spark to people in a way that just goes somewhere with it, and it keeps you from quite so much despair.
Yeah. There you go. Very well said, Polly. Very, very wise words. Polly, thanks so much for the call, and thanks for sharing that with us. Amen. Joe in Cupertino, California. Hey, Joe, what's up?
Hi, Tom. I'm sorry. I called about global warming, but you're such a heartwarming story about the woman that called yesterday. I was listening as well. I wanted to say, you know, this too shall pass. It's an old adage I heard, and I believe it's really important to, you know, keep perspective. I have a question. My congressional representative posted about the volcanoes being exposed in the Arctic because of the melt, and I tweeted something back to him about a real pet peeve of mine, and I don't know if I'm answering this question. Maybe you can help me. The exhaust that's coming out of cars today is carbon monoxide as the result of combustion, but because of catalytic converters, I guess it's not carbon monoxide, but carbon dioxide that's causing the ozone to deplete. People sitting in their cars waiting to pick up their kids for 25, 30 minutes with the air conditioner on really has bothered me for some time, and somebody chimed in and said that, well, it's not carbon monoxide, so it's okay. And I just think that that's the wrong way of looking at it. Can you help?
Yeah, it doesn't matter whether it's carbon monoxide or carbon dioxide. It's carbon, and it's going to work as a greenhouse gas. Carbon monoxide is a molecule of carbon and a molecule, or an atom of carbon and an atom of oxygen, and it's in an ionic state. Carbon monoxide is unstable. I don't recall if it has a negative or positive charge, but it's got a charge, and it's trying to bind another atom of oxygen to it to get H2O, which would, CO2, which would be carbon dioxide, and instead of carbon monoxide. And it will eventually. I mean, the carbon monoxide released by cars, by the time it gets up to 20,000 feet, it's carbon dioxide. So it doesn't matter. You don't have to worry about that. And the catalytic converters, most of what they're doing is decreasing the toxicity of what's coming out and the particulate, the poisons that are in there, but they're not reducing the level of carbon. And it's carbon that is killing our planet. It's not. We personally are not poisoned by carbon unless it's in an ionic form like carbon monoxide. But that's the problem. Joe, thanks for the call. We can talk about volcanoes another time. Give me a shout about that, because volcanoes had a lot to do with several of the previous extinctions, particularly the Permian. But right at this moment, that's not a big issue for us. Anyhow, thanks so much for being with us today. And don't forget, democracy is not a spectator sport. It requires all hands on deck. That includes you. Peg, you're it. We'll see you tomorrow.
You've been listening to Thom Hartmann. For audio and video archives, visit thomhartmann.com.
The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by the Aiden Forecast, an investment newsletter with weekly updates of leading market indicators and a monthly deep dive into what the details of the economy and the markets mean for investors and retirees. On the web at aidenmarkets.com.
Wines have some of the highest pesticide levels in our food chain. This hour brought to you by EcoWine.com. Pesticide-free wines, organic wines, imported from France by the Organic Wine Company, EcoWine.com.
Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by Super Beets. Super Beets are sourced from non-GMO beets, and they're packed with dietary nitrates, helping to produce nitric oxide for more energy, stamina, and support for healthy blood pressure levels naturally. For more information, call 800-223-8242
or visit tomsbeets.com. Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.